Okuda Kaigo has made it a habit to live cautiously in these shackles. The desire to put an end to this shitty cycle came to him suddenly. It was a large lottery win. Okuda Kaigo reports that he left the company, moved to a rural town in Hokkaido, and began farming as a hobby. That was the time. He says that when he realized this, he cursed the situation. It was transferred to another world, like an RPG model. Okuda Kaigo says that's probably enough. He then explains that he was nervous at first when he was suddenly whisked away to such a different world. But now he seems to be coping somehow and says that this other world is very good and how wonderful freedom is. He reports that during the entire disaster, he was moved along with the chicken coop and the shed for farming tools, that the eggs laid by the chickens can be eaten, and that edible wild plants can be collected with the help of farming tools. Okuda Kaigo says he probably won't die of hunger anytime soon. He says that if we talk about another world, then it is magic and skills. He tried various chants and poses. Okuda Kaigo says he needs an evaluation, then he tastes something with concentration. He says the plant is actually a potato fruit with physical and magical powers and a tiny energy-restoring effect. He explains that apparently all he can use is his assessment skill, which echoes a pattern he had in his past as an employee at a trading firm. Okuda Kaigo tells the monster to come to him. He says it's a good thing he set the trap, and a message appears saying he's leveled up. He then explains that a mysterious window has appeared with information about his stats. Okuda Kaigo says that when he went from level 1 to level 2, he was scared by the status window that suddenly appeared, but was no longer surprised. He says that the third level is too weak for him. He thinks so. Okuda Kaigo explains that by defeating monsters, you can evaluate them. He explains that it's a goblin, or that the area is called Lancaster. He says that in any case, you need to use everything that seems useful, since this is the basis of survival. Okuda Kaigo reports that he immediately uses the stones and medicinal herbs he collected, first the firestone and the femto stone. The firestone has the properties of fire, and the femto stone is used as a grinding material. He explains that you need to grind it on both sides, then mix it with an abrasive flame, and if you polish the goblin's dagger with this, you will get a whetstone for agricultural tools. You'll get a fire dagger made of low-grade iron with fire properties. Okuda Kaigo says that if you have at least encryption material, you can add properties to other weapons, and to do this, you need to collect as much of it as possible, calling it a cool weapon attribute. He says a new dual potion has appeared, and as expected, the results are excellent. He shows a description of a potion with effects that restore wounds, magical powers, and moderate energy. He carefully strains the potion and tastes it. He then explains that it's a class of medicinal herbs, and in this form, they do have some effect, but the slow absorption of the healing properties and the amount required to consume create difficulties. Okuda Kaigo says that he needs to drink this to perform the assessment, and if combined with the antidote. He's lying on the ground among the chickens and says he needs an antidote herb. He explains that if anyone were to look at him now, they'd definitely think he's a fool. He explains that Marlene's antidote herb neutralizes the toxins of poisonous herbs. Okuda Kaigo reports that he has produced a rather strong poison and will use it in battle by coating the tips of his arrows with it. He explains that if the plants collected with roots are buried in an ordinary field, he hopes that they can be successfully bred, but this is bait. Okuda Kaigo says the shine of his chicken wings has improved significantly. A chicken pecks at the food from the grass, and he's surprised, asking if this is possible. He explains that the meat is nutritious, restorative, and detoxifying. He asks if tonic herbs can interact with medicinal ones. Then he says, "Great guys," and takes a sip. Okuda Kaigo says it's a good thing he was already cutting up the chicken carcasses while the meat was roasting. He says it's so delicious, and that his life wasn't in vain. Okuda Kaigo reports that it is delicious. Okuda Kaigo says that he needs to pull himself together and go to the city to sell everything he has created. Then he says this. Okuda Kaigo explains that a piece of another will live a long life in this world. He says there are many things he, as an ordinary Japanese man, can't create with his own hands, and to buy them he needs to be rich. He says the round trip takes 3 hours, and it's far, but he's serious about it. The guy says he's not used to walking long distances, and his legs are like sticks. Okuda Kaigo asks if he can buy a horse in the city. Okuda Kaigo says he's a merchant. The man tries to tell him something, but he doesn't understand. He says he doesn't understand the local language, but there's no need to memorize it. He thinks the guard seems to have figured out what the merchant is and says everything is fine. Okuda Kaigo and the guard exchange gestures of agreement. Okuda Kaigo says he's buying. He explains that if you understand the words sell, buy, thank you, simple greetings, and numbers, there won't be any problems with trade transactions and nothing to worry about. He says that there is an adventurers guild in this city, which he joined by pure chance. He says that this is the Adventurers Guild building. Okuda Kaigo reports that the guild has a quest notice board and a cash register where you can get information about all the achievements. Okuda Kaigo, he says, I'm selling, and the man replies in an incomprehensible language. Okuda Kaigo. He mainly fishes for long-toothed grouper. He enters the room and informs them that, in addition to not understanding the language, this adds to the difficulties. Therefore, they must either submit or join forces to fight. The guy says something after Okuda Kaigo leaves. Arms and armor dealer Margot says hello, and the petty trader says it's a coincidence. Okuda Kaigo reports that these are two people who are especially cared for in this city. Okuda Kaigo reports that weapons with powers seem to be popular. A man shouts, I'm buying. Okuda Kaigo explains that this time he will sell Margot and make more, asking not to quarrel. Okuda Kaigo says it's impossible to stay in the village. The man and woman ask why he doesn't move to the city. Okuda Kaigo explains that his answer is a clear no. The man and woman express regret and apologize for their request. The man explains that the atmosphere tells you what they're talking about. He reports that the repeated impulses to break with everything he was consumed by in the past world don't know when they will appear in this one. He explains that he's really bad at building relationships with people. Okuda Kaigo reports that he has accumulated a significant amount of gold coins. Okuda Kaigo reports that this is an estimate. He explains that the language of this country seems to be called Lancaster and says that it just happened that way. If you use the skill of evaluating sentences in Japanese, the Lancaster language will appear, and it takes time to translate, but you can communicate in writing. Okuda Kaigo says that as expected, he relied on Ms. Sarasa. The guy asks if he needs to wait. Okuda Kaigo. He thanks her and says that Ms. Sarasa is more than just a person. The man explains that it will be easier to return. Okuda Kaigo announces that he's finished his business in town and can probably head back, and says goodbye. He wonders why they both tagged along. He says that of course, if you buy a horse, there must be a stable, and at the same time he reports that he has received an offer to build a forge. Okuda Kaigo says he's just grateful for it and reports that it's a murky state. Rejecting city life for fear of those very urges, I am trapped in my own shell. Margot and Sarasa continue to gently push through her, even to someone like Okuda Kaigo. It's not just a business relationship here. The woman reports feeling something else. A man in armor sits nearby. Okuda Kaigo says he doesn't want to create more shackles than necessary. He reports that he even received some plans and concerns. Okuda Kaigo informs that he will need to thank these two later. He announces that the extension is complete and he has risen to the level of a merchant and a farmer, and the horse makes a sound. According to the design of Lancaster, Margot, and Sarasa, the merchants of this world, a forge and stable were added to the house, the chicken coop, and the barn for farm implements. Okuda Kaigo reports that this has given him storage space for his crafted items, and it seems he can now forge and mix elixirs without worrying about monsters. He says it's a new variety of Barna's detoxifying potion, with magical restoration that neutralizes moderate-level poison in small quantities. He explains that if you split the potion into portions for personal use and for trade, it would look like this. Okuda Kaigo says that we can stockpile here, the blacksmith is at his best, and then is it worth increasing the production of attribute weapons? He says that before that he must reflect on Margot and Sarasa's gratitude. Okuda Kaigo says that while he's expressing gratitude, he doesn't know what he can do for them and is contemplating a meal and dinner. He reports that the shops in Resta mostly contained items that could be preserved, such as dried meat or hard bread. Okuda Kaigo. He explains that if you try to use leafy plants as houseplants and divide the meat between 3 people, you'll need at least 2 chickens to count. He adds that eating more than this will reduce your egg yield. The eggs of the grass-fed chicken are nutritious and restore physical strength. Okuda Kaigo says that as a farmer he is not interested in this, but he can go hunting, and that he thinks he can at least hunt a rabbit. He says it's a wolf-shaped monster and asks if he's trapped. Okuda Kaigo reports that it's just in time. He says that if this can raise the level, he doesn't look like a cheater, and explains that the rating is what matters most. Okuda Kaigo says, and reports that it looks like it can be eaten, explaining that it is a wolf monster that lives throughout the Lancaster region. He reports that he has time to wait. He explains that he was rescued by the dismantling shop attached to the guild, and that, as expected, he is inexperienced in butchering a wolf. Okuda Kaigo says this is a remarkable quest. He explains it's not a chicken, but a pacification mission, and asks what a cockatrice is. Okuda Kaigo, he says that the pacification order has nothing to do with him, but greets his interlocutor. The man says hello to Kaigo. Dan, the guild administrator, greets them. Okuda Kaigo says something incomprehensible, then says he still doesn't understand what Dan is saying. Dan says another incomprehensible phrase, to which Okuda Kaigo responds with a question. Kai, the martial arts master, welcomes Kigo Okuda. The man greets him, and Okuda Kaigo says he can learn some skills. Okuda Kaigo says he really wanted self-defense skills. He reports that the first thing he does is express his gratitude and thank him very much. Okuda Kaigo says it's strong. Okuda Kaigo throws a punch, then the man calls him by name and he says he'll try. Okuda Kaigo says it's sparkled. Okuda Kaigo shouts, forward. Okuda Kaigo reports acquiring the strike skill. The man says the strike is weak. Okuda Kaigo explains that due to the excessive adventurer deaths caused by monsters, he reports that Master Kai's blow was astonishingly powerful. He buys some from a vendor, who explains that depending on their tempering, they should be useful. Okuda Kaigo expresses gratitude that the dojo skill taught him about the possibility of acquiring skills beyond just assessment. Okuda Kaigo says that once the cooking preparations are ready, it's time to practice. Okuda Kaigo says it's a stone statue of a goblin. The snake makes a sharp sound and the man expresses surprise. Okuda Kaigo says the name cockatrice with surprise. He says it's impossible and repeats this several times, making noises along the way. Then he hears a knock and asks if it's a person. After that, he hears another knock and reports a blow. The girl says, Kaigo. Okuda Kaigo says, it's Sarasa. He's screaming and the girl next to him is saying something anxiously. The girl asks if it was scary. The man replies that it was. The man explains that it's different and that it's a Japanese greeting, and then says that he needs to calm down because the eye patch man tells Kaigo that the cockatrice is a quest. Kaigo replies that yes, it is. The eye patch man explains that, with a man who looks like an adventurer and a weapon, they will go and quell this, the guy asks. Okuda Kaigo says he's grateful. The man says that if they rely on him, everything will be fine. The girl, the boy, and the man say words that sound like a spell or a summoning. He says he has absolutely no idea how the situation currently stands. The tattooed man explains what needs to be done now. The guy tells the girl what to do next. Okuda Kaigo says that he can prepare and give out spare weapons and medicines, explains that with different languages this is quite difficult, and says that he will write the names of the items on the board, and also says that this feeling is pleasant. He explains that this is a double potion, and here is Perun's detox potion. Okuda Kaigo talks about Perun's detox potion, and the man with the eye patch responds with a question. He says that apparently this potion can be used, then everything will be fine. The girl calls Kaigo. The woman says the three of them worked out a strategy. Okuda Kaigo asks if it's a drawing. The man replies, in other words. The boy asks if they want him to attack, using his bow as a signal. The man explains that, unlike them, he was until recently an employee of a trading company in another world. He explains that in this world, everything is like a game, and that it's pointless to bet your life against a monster. The girl says there's no need to stress so much, since he's already done everything he could. Okuda Kaigo says he can't stop thinking about how he could have acted differently and changed the outcome. The girl says something to Okuda Kaigo, who takes off his glove. He looks at the other boy and the man in armor, who smile and greet him. The girl watches them. Okuda Kaigo says he's scared and explains that they said something like 3 arrows. He then sighs heavily. He says that if he wanders around like this, he won't be able to do anything in fear, and he is also sure that if he is alone, he will most likely die. The woman says they need to go to the village to get help. Okuda Kaigo says he understands. The armored man and the other men listen to him. He asks to at least return home alive, noticing that the creature is huge. Okuda Kaigo says he's jealous of Sarasa, who stayed behind to watch the house, and notes that the two are still there. He reports that they are carrying out the plan and warns them to receive his poisoned arrow. The upper right corner depicts an arrow flying towards its target. The lower left corner shows a creature's head, struck by the arrow, with its eye wide open. In the upper right, Okuda Kaigo stands with a sword against a dragon and a winged creature, claiming he's hit the target. In the upper left, a man in armor delivers a powerful punch to the ground. In the lower right, Okuda Kaigo moves sharply, preparing for his next move. He says it's impressive. These two are probably at a higher level than him. The man says it's dangerous that their eyes met. The man says he can't avoid it. Okuda Kaigo notices the dragon's fiery breath and reacts with surprise. He then encounters another man who violently attacks him. Okuda Kaigo thanks him for his help. He says it's petrification. The hand breaks, and the man says something that starts with the word what. Okuda Kaigo says this is a detox potion called Paru Nagav Garanana. He says it might be affecting rigor mortis, the guy confirms. He and the guy are drinking from bottles. The guy says the drink is addictive. Okuda Kaigo explains that if this continues, he'll need to double his counterattack and says he's quite weak. He then says that if he attacks now, even he can defeat the opponent and praises his skill. Okuda Kaigo and the other guy decide to use a punch, after which Okuda. He screams while attacking with his sword along with the other guy. Okuda Kaigo delivers a powerful sword strike to a massive monster. The guy reports that he did it. The man asks if it's true. He gains a level up and his new stats are displayed. Physical strength 10-16, magic power 4-8, energy 6-10, strength 11.16, intelligence 70-71, mastery 13-17, agility 12. Two fists collide in a powerful blow. Okuda Kaigo says it must be Juno. The man tries to pronounce his name, and the girl thanks Juno and Margot. The man explains that 3 arrows, even if the allies are completely powerless individually, can win together. The man says that by combining the powers of 3 people, victory can be achieved. The guy reports that one of the arrows is more fragile than it looks. The man says that maybe he just got lucky this time and laughs. The first serious battle, however, Kaigo has it on his chest. A celebration in honor of the victory over the strongest cockatrice. A man with a fork in his hand says it's a celebration. A woman smiles and holds her face, and another man with an eye patch also holds a fork and smiles. The tattooed man explains that this time he added garlic and salt to the meat, but it tastes pretty good without them. Okuda Kaigo says to eat as much as you can and take your time. He says he brought more beer. A man with tattoos explains that deliciously prepared food can express different feelings. A girl and a man with short dark hair are eating. A boy thanks a bearded man and a girl for building a stable and a forge. Okuda Kaigo thanks another boy for being able to defeat the cockatrice and also says thank you. He says, let's have a drink. Okuda Kaigo makes a toast, after which the girl asks what happened. Okuda Kaigo explains what it is and points to something out of frame. He reports that these are blue wolves, and there are 3 of them. Okuda Kaigo says that they may have come for the smell of the food he cooked. The guy on the right says that it's normal for strong monsters to be drawn to the smell of food, so if they don't attack them, there's no need to attack them. He explains this from a position of caution. The guy explains that this isn't just a sword, but a special weapon. The man says that such a weapon can change the course of a battle. Okuda Kaigo says that this. He explains that he wants to pick up a bow, but doesn't know how to use it. The man and the boy with the guns on their backs look at him with questions. He again says that he doesn't know how to handle a bow, pointing at it. The man and the boy listen attentively. Okuda Kaigo explains what sasasa is. A girl asks him to stop laughing while looking at her like that. The girl explains that she's asking him to stop laughing while looking at her like that. A man is telling something to a group of people sitting outdoors. He says it's better to remain neutral and spread less evil around. Okuda Kaigo says that after everything he's been through, he doesn't really want to become easy prey again. In this world, the most important thing is not defeating the enemy, but survival, so any risks must be eliminated. He says thank you and wishes you a safe journey. The man, the woman, and the other man respond to him. Okuda Kaigo reports that he was able to thank the 3 and practice a bit. He then waves his hand toward the carriage carrying the 3 people as it departs. He is silent, looking into the distance, and then says that everything is fine. Okuda Kaigo says that this should be enough, and the sound of a shovel being driven in is heard, after which he exhales. He explains that this farm is perfect for setting traps of this kind, calling it a classic nest trap. He then places a bunch of poisonous grass and says it's ready. After that, he takes a bundle of materials and announces that he'll move on to the next one. Okuda Kaigo explains that he thinks this will do. He then picks up several long wooden planks and explains what they are. After this, Okuda Kaigo works with the tool at the anvil. He reports that a rattle alarm is installed. He explains that he places them around his house. Okuda Kaigo informs them that the tiger trap he bought from the guild still needs to be set up and says that it only needs to be adjusted. The man reports that the security system has been installed. Okuda Kaigo says it's never a bad idea to be cautious and that his chances of survival have increased. The guy says that even though he lives on the outskirts, it's worth leaving a warning sign just in case, since people live in this area and they are dangerous. Okuda Kaigo says he's done everything he needed to do on the outside. All that's left is to put the tools away. He also reports that he says he initially wanted to make himself a shield, but suggests that perhaps they should renovate the hut. The sound of someone hitting the fence. The man says that even if it seems like a rather tedious task, like cleaning, once you start, you won't be able to stop. The man says he sighs. Okuda Kaigo says that there are no boards left and says that he managed to make a lot of things with them today, so it's not surprising. He says that even though he lives in a small hut that looks like a chicken coop, this is all a home created by his own hands. Okuda Keigo says it's finally dinner time. Today's menu includes blue wolf steak with the addition of Urino medicinal herbs and a pinch of salt. He says he decided to drink Milanese fruit liqueur because it goes well with meat dishes, adding that even though it was the same thing he had for lunch, it was still so delicious. The guy says, bon appetit. The man makes the sound A-O-N. Okuda Kaigo reports that if these are the same wolves that were roaming around the area this afternoon, he remains silent. He yells, he, then says it can't be and explains that maybe they are people and they need something, so that's probably it. Okuda Kaigo explains that none of these are people after all, and says, damn it. He prepares for battle, holding a sword and shield. He says that first we need to deal with the one who has fallen behind the pack. He draws his bow and shoots the creature. Okuda Keigo says there are 2 more left. He then asks what, and explains that there aren't any here. He stands in the corner with his sword raised, and 2 monstrous beasts roar and threaten him on either side. Then he screams, expressing fear and anger. Okuda Kaigo fights the wolves, deflecting their attacks with his shield and striking them. He announces that he will receive tea. A crunching sound is heard during the fight. He grips the hilt of his sword and delivers a powerful blow, breaking the wooden board. Okuda Keigo reports that the adrenaline has hit him hard, and he doesn't feel any fear at all, even though the situation is dire. He announces that he is alone and orders an attack. He repels the wolf's attack and strikes back. Okuda Kaigo reports that his level has increased from 7 to 9, with increased physical strength, intelligence, magical power, skill, energy, agility, and strength. He says it's over. He says that, finally. Okuda Kaigo tells him that, seriously, no matter how much power he has, it's not enough in this world. He explains that it was close and it would be worth writing a suicide note. He says he hears a sound and asks where it's coming from, then notices the sound is here. He says it's not over yet. Okuda Keigo says, ah, then states that in an instant he realized, and after that he says, ooh. In the right panel, a dog turns back. In the left panel, 2 dogs bark at each other, their tails swirling around a man's legs. The dog laughs. Okuda Keigo reveals that the wolves were going to kill him, even though it was inevitable. He explains that all that remains of them now is their puppy, which he held in his arms. He says it will be too much, and he can't twist the dog's head. The dog says no. Okuda Keigo announces that he will take responsibility for raising this little one. Then he walks out the door. He says that he is tired and wants to rest a little, and also reports that the dog lying on his chest seems to be tired too. The girl says it's a wolf cub and calls him Tav. The man says the puppy is not for sale. Okuda Kaigo says that she must have really taken a liking to him. He explains that refreshing 3 wolves is no easy task, so he asks them for help. He tells the name of the material Ash Wolf Fang and then gives the rating. He explains that this material is used to enhance weapons. Okuda Keigo says it's necessary to lick and asks for licking. He then explains that the dog says Tav. The guy says he's selling everything the wolves left behind. He explains that even though the wolves wanted to eat him, he did just fine. Okuda Kaigo reports that he performed an assessment on the wolf cub when he woke up, and it turns out that it is a cub of a rare species of ash wolf, whose fur is significantly different from that of other wolves. He says that if the wolf cub grows up near people, then he probably won't attack them, but if he harms people when he grows up, then he will have to take responsibility and kill him. Okuda Keigo says that if he had understood what happened to his parents, he might have wanted revenge. He explains that this is the law of this world. The weak become food for the strong, and says he will do his best. The little creature bites him and makes a bite-bite sound. Okuda Kaigo announces that he has decided to make a cloak from the fur of an ash wolf. He explains to the girl that he wants to make a cloak from the fur of an ash wolf. He explains that he likes this color, and that the wolf cub will recognize him as its parent through the smell of his fur. Okuda Keigo says he remembers the name exactly. The woman thanks him and wishes him a safe journey. He says they'll be acquainted, Ash, and the dog responds with a woof. The text explains that this is the first family member in the new world and the weight of Keigo's new life. The man says he. Okuda Kaigo says, ooh, and asks Ash not to eat those chickens. Okuda Kaigo yells at him not to ruin his seedlings. Okuda Kaigo says that since then he hasn't had time to be sad, and that he vowed to Ash's parents to raise him. He says that if the pet gets dirty every day, they might run out of water, and agrees. He mentions that Margot left some extra ingots and suggests they see what they can make with them. He explains that he can shape them. The pet lies in the mud. Okuda Kaigo reports that the blacksmithing took a long time, but he's finally prepared a heated bath. He explains that since he got here, he's been just rinsing himself with water, and now he'll finally take a warm bath. Okuda Kaigo explains what's wrong with the cart. He says it's a spacious and peaceful place. He scoops up some water, says how refreshing it is, and sighs with relief. He explains that he drinks water from the city, but if he needs a lot of water, it's more convenient to go to the lake. He remarks that he doesn't think he's seen anything like it before. Okuda Keigo says they're about to get a lot of water and asks if that's true, Ash. The dog growls and barks. Okuda Keigo notices the noise and asks what it is and if anyone is nearby. The dog growls loudly. Okuda Keigo is hit and falls, cursing. He says, "Excellent, Ash," and orders a poisoned arrow to the knee. Ash barks and lunges at the monster, who growls. He announces that it's a monster. The monster screams and attacks, and Okuda Kaigo strikes it. Kaigo reports that it was a surprisingly easy victory, but denies that it was all thanks to someone else. Kaigo thanks him and says it was all thanks to the dog. He says that seriously, maybe he shot it at him and it was water magic. He explains that it's a water monster that specializes in water magic. He says that's right, assessment. Ash says that if he hadn't warned him, Okuda Kaigo says it's Symphony No. 5, Part 2. He says he did something with a joyful exclamation, and the dog barks. Okuda Keigo says that the cat seems to like the symphony, and the cat makes a wow-woo sound. Okuda Keigo then asks the cat to look at him and laughs, saying how cute it is. He says he needs to get stronger to protect Ash and suggests that the problem might be his diet. He explains that simply buying him food won't make Ash stronger and says that he feeds him herbs and eggs, but that's not enough. He reports that he often visits. Okuda Kaigo explains that he will avoid useless battles and has also learned that there are monsters that can use magic. He explains that attacking them will be better than simply defending himself, but asks what else he can do and whether he should buy a more powerful weapon to be able to counter them. He says that you need to leave these thoughts behind because it's too much of a hassle. He explains that if there is one, then Okuda Keigo catches the dog and says he's caught, but the dog barks. He then asks it not to splash and explains that he considers it fate to meet Ash in this world and is confident that he can protect Ash and live just as peacefully. The scene depicts an animal shaking and shaking off water. Okuda Kaigo reports that they can now take hot baths whenever they want, and his pet makes a noise. He says he feels a little uneasy, but there's nothing he can do until it dries. The man seriously says he can't concentrate properly when he's nervous, and he announces that he will make a weapon today. He explains that he started with great enthusiasm, didn't think it would be easy, and practiced blacksmithing for several days with scrap iron. He explains that he wanted to succeed several times to be absolutely sure, and Okuda Keigo announces that he's finally finished and shows off the sword he made himself. He explains that the sword is called the Wolverine Sword and is a weapon made of solid precious iron reinforced with the fang of an ash wolf. Okuda Keigo says the sword sounds powerful and adds, he says that with this stone, he can definitely protect Ash. He explains that he'll use the firestone he recently collected and that they should try to crush the scales and the stone and mix the dust together. He hopes the stone won't explode. Then he says that nothing happened. Okuda Keigo says, his tongue vibrating, expressing displeasure. He explains that Thunder Demon Powder imbues weapons with the element of lightning and that combining fire and water produces lightning. Okuda Keigo then says that if this is true, Wolverine's sword needs to be polished with the powder. He reports that he's made a new sword, explaining that the feeling of creating something amazing comes from the sword, made of solid precious iron, reinforced with an ash wolf fang and possessing the element of lightning. He says all that's left is to wrap the hilt with duct tape. The man says he'd also like to use magic, but he realizes he needs to improve his defense and shooting skills first, and that's where he can get help. He explains that he's made the decision to protect Ash as a parent and partner, so he must continue to improve his defensive skills. He adds that he doesn't. Okuda Keigo says he can stop it. The man thanks him. The man yells, "Charge," and Okuda Keigo says he's charged. He tells Kai to concentrate and repeat exactly what Kai's teacher does. The man with the mustache addresses Kaigo, addressing him by name. He replies that he'll try now, adding that he knew Kai's teacher was cool, but not that cool. Okuda Kaigo says it's working, but he needs more work. He announces he's acquired the charged arrow skill. The man on the right applauds, and the man on the left says he needs more work. Okuda Kaigo shouts charged and, now, preparing to fire the arrow. The old man tells Kaigo that he's now on defense and urges him to take action. Kaigo says he's attacking and strikes with a shield that feels like steel. Kaigo declares that he's now a fortress. The old man explains that it takes courage to go up against a man, and all for the sake of acquiring skills. The man screams and strikes him with a stick. Okuda Keigo shields himself with his hands and takes the blow. Okuda Keigo announces that the fortress skill has been acquired and says that's excellent. The man screams, followed by a loud thud. Okuda Kigo says that all that remains is to train. The man thanks him and bids him farewell. He explains that he learned a lot of skills today, but he's very tired and needs to practice more. The man calls out to Keigo. The girl tells the man that he's here. Okuda Kaigo says the cloak he ordered was of the highest quality, as expected from Sarasa. The girl explains that it's a memento of his parents and needs to be taken care of. The man thanks her for this. The woman says it's a small shield and knocks on it. The man asks if it's a shield. The woman says, "Hmm?" The man looks at the shield. The woman is surprised. The man leaves. The man explains that the shield looks flimsy. He simply used a barrel lid as a base. The woman says the guy seems quite comfortable in her arms and admits to being jealous. The man replies and says he's back. The woman says goodbye, wishing to see her again, and the man thanks her and says, "See you soon." Okuda Kaigo reports that he tried on the cloak again and it still looks cool, noting that it even has an internal pocket for a flask. He then explains that he still has some Murnum scale dust left and asks if he can add an element to the armor. After that, he explains. He says that by enchanting the brooch with the element of water, he gained fire resistance, and that it is better to have an advantage than not, and also believes that perhaps he should enchant the shield as well, calling it a new discovery. He tells Ash the dog that her kidney will definitely protect her, and the sound of something being thrust into something is heard on the right. Okuda Kigo reports that training has now become a daily routine for him. A bark and a questioning sound are heard in the lower left, to which Okuda Keigo responds. In the upper right, he drinks water. The guy says what's going on. He reports that a group of horsemen is approaching. Okuda Keigo says that Juno is here and Margot, and he says that this man looks like an aristocrat with adventurers, but asks what he wants from him. Okuda Keigo says he knows he's a terrible person, but he says, "Ha," and expresses surprise at being escorted to a forest dungeon. He explains that he's an ordinary villager living near the city and doubts that a soldier with such a pack of his could handle a horde of monsters. The man reacts sharply to Kaigo's words, expressing his dismay. The man asks if Okuda Kaigo can refuse him, and Okuda Kaigo says, "Okay." The man says he'll have to provide them with a potion and asks what it is. He says, "Uh-huh." The man explains that apparently this aristocrat's name is Byron and addresses him as Mr. Byron. The man explains that the monsters in the dungeon are stronger than usual and asks how he thinks he'll be useful there. Okuda Keigo says he doesn't usually go into the forest, but he can gather new herbs for study. The woman replies that they're not acting in a movie or anything. The boy reveals that he has the ability to breathe fire and explains that it helps him fight enemies. The man explains that his fire breath can create powerful streams of flame capable of destroying obstacles and opponents. In the upper right shot, the wolves are shown, and Okuda Kigo explains that everything that happened felt unreal to him. In the upper middle shot, the nobleman and his retinue are giving orders from a safe location, with Okuda Kigo explaining that they didn't care what happened to the mercenaries. In the upper, he says he's tired of it back in his world, but here it's the same, and inequality exists in this world too. Simultaneously, shouts of "forward" and "Gee" are heard. Okuda Keigo reports to the fortress, orders them to flee, and says they need to flee now. The man notices that the enemy's movement has slowed. He says it's not just a dog, but a monster that can kill a person with one bite. He explains that this monster is very fast and aggressive, and warns people to stay away. The boy tells him to go to a place like that. The man explains what it is. Information appears on the screen about his level, which is increased from 10 to 11, as well as increased physical strength, intelligence, magical power, mastery, energy, agility, and strength. Okuda Keigo says they're spikes and describes the hellhound as a large, whispery monster that breathes flames and becomes vulnerable after using its flame attack. The man says, "Damn, he's already back." The man says that of course he was angry with them for running away and wishes he would have mercy. The man puts something in his bag. The man grabs another man's hand. Okuda Kaigo reveals that the best choice was to show his regret. He explains that he realized that in addition to monsters, this other world contains powerful enemies called aristocrats. He reports that it concerns him. Even after such a harsh ordeal, Okuda Keigo reports that few people are affected by the death of others, and the girl says the word "garble" twice. He says that he may consider his life dependent on this aristocrat, but he wouldn't mourn at all. He explains that living in the city sounds like a good idea and says that he's thought about it. No matter where you are, you can't escape the fear for your life, but in the city and beyond, you can encounter a monster calling itself an aristocrat. A man drinks from a bottle. Okuda Kaigo reveals that he was reluctant to interact with people from the start and therefore prioritizes peace of mind over safety. He says he understands that he looks like a weirdo to others, but he doesn't care what people think of me anymore. The man in armor says to forgive them. Okuda Kaigo says they don't need to apologize. He just wants to be left alone, as he wants to get home as soon as possible, where Ash is waiting for him. The man says goodbye. He says he's completely tired and hopes food will help him recover. He then starts eating, but suddenly collapses, saying he can't move and asking what's going on. Okuda Kaigo makes a noise when a cat suddenly grabs him. Okuda Kaigo asks where he is, and the girl calls his name. Okuda Kaigo says Ash in surprise, holding the cat. A man with tattoos sits nearby. The girl says it's poison and it's not allowed. He says he must have been mistaken. He asks for forgiveness. He explains that Margot and Juno are probably tired too, but despite that, they were able to carry him here. The man says he's truly sorry. The woman says she slept for about 6 hours, and Okuda Kaigo says they were looking after Ash and Renante the whole time. He says thank you. The man says he's caused trouble again. The girl says that the guys are very kind, and Okuda Kaigo says that he wants to say this. He says he's fine and says goodbye until we meet again. The man says they'll see each other again. Okuda Kaigo says he was sure it was Saris's room and asks if it was a hotel. He then says he still has to thank the three of them and says, okay. He says that it is worth staying away from the forest, but they have destroyed the enemy's habitat, and he does not know when he will be able to resist them again. Okuda Kaigo says it's clear now, and explains that the plant has a strong anesthetic effect and has no antidote. He also talks about the herb he ate. He says it's an anesthetic herb. Okuda Kaigo says he's almost done. He advises against preparing the prey until the poison has left the body, and explains that a decoction of green anesthetic herb should be used beforehand. Below, two creatures make sounds and say the word fortress. Okuda Kaigo informs him that he won't be of any use when he's taken back to the dungeon. He explains that without honing his skills and putting everything off until later, the fortress will never be reached. Screams and sounds of battle echo throughout. He shouts to the goblin that he doesn't chase those who run away. The goblin lets out a piercing scream. Okuda Kaigo says he's doing great and feels like he's getting stronger. He reports that he hasn't been attacked by wolves recently. He says, woof, strokes the animal, and tells it that it is sleeping. The sounds of work can be heard against the background of a factory chimney. Okuda Kaigo announces that everything is ready and that he has finally completed the fire daggers. The guy says he has a couple more things for sale. The man says they also caught and dried some venison. On the right page, Okuda Kaigo announces that he'll take the dog with him to town as thanks, and the dog responds with a woof. The left page shows Margot's gun shop, the door opening with a ding sound. The man says he is buying. Okuda Kaigo announces that he's selling equipment, explaining that it's very popular and gets bought every time. The tattooed man stares at Okuda Kaigo and then leaves, asking what's going on. The man asks what this thing is, and he explains that he wanted to sell it to sagas. Okuda Kaigo announces that he's selling saras. The man says he wants to buy everything. Okuda Kaigo explains that the man wants to buy everything from him wholesale and then sell it himself. The guy agrees to sell the goods. The man asks if it's all the same to him and confirms it is. The guy explains he has drinks and laughs. The man smiles. Okuda Kaigo says he can't say for sure, but it seems Margot isn't a very responsible person either, and wonders if he's closing the store. The man closes the store door. He reports that Juno has also arrived and tells Sarasa. Sarasa replies to Okuda Kaigo. The man confirms Sarasa's words and explains that everything is now clear. Okuda Kaigo says they'll drink. A man, a woman, and two guys raise their glasses and plates of food. The woman says it's chicken with vegetables. The man thanks her for the hospitality and asks if the chicken is from another world. Okuda Kaigo reports that the chicken skewers are almost ready. He says that when he came into this world, he experienced a lot. The guy says that even though they live side by side with death, he can still confidently smile like these three. Okuda Kaigo says that Ash will eat too, and the dog replies, woof. Okuda Kaigo says he feels safe here, then says that's good. Okuda Kaigo asks if that's a confidence boost. He says that the sky without high-rise buildings, strewn with stars and a bright moon, is truly beautiful. Okuda Kaigo says that it's probably because he slept in his armor yesterday that his whole body hurts. The man sighs. He reports that Ash seems to be fine and asks who the fluffy one is, saying he needs to get some water for a bath before coming home. The dog responds with a woof and a whoop, and he confirms that yes, he is. The girl says that everything is ready. Okuda Kaigo announces that he's drawn a bath for them and tells Ash to head out. Ash makes a noise and asks what it is. He reports that the merman has appeared again. Okuda Kaigo says, wait, what is this monster? And makes a frightened noise. The man says the merman looks like a baby compared to him. He tells them that they must leave before they are noticed, and at the same time he picks up the cat, which meows. The guy reports hearing a loud sound. The man says he makes the sound "grew." The guy screams, the man makes a sound of surprise. Okuda Kaigo shouts that it's time to leave, while simultaneously trying to lead the horse away, which gets spooked and starts running. He says that now is not the time to be distracted, and calls for Wanaya. He says it's impossible and says it just can't happen. Okuda Kaigo says a huge monster is ruling the pond and asks what to do. The man says, Ufu. The man explains, Vanna, and adds, but in the upper right corner, a man announces that no matter what monster they encounter, the hero from the RPG game can take them down. The man explains that he's a farmer and can't do anything about the monsters, but he knows where the average person should go. The man shows a drawing and exclaims, what kind of beast is this? Okuda Kaigo asks a man for help. The man asks if it's a snake, and Okuda Kaigo confirms. He reports that the order to tame the snake is clear and explains that this huge monster is called a snake. The man explains that if this reptile is a snake, he will have to rely on someone else's help and hopes that someone will be found who can defeat this snake. Okuda Kaigo asks to accept the order to tame the snake and informs him that the reward is 5 gold coins. He says that he will do so. He says he's tired and only dug a trench, but at least it's better than doing nothing at all. He reports that he was lucky, after all, because a group of skilled adventurers answered his ad, and they even found his bathtub. Okuda Kaigo explains that he doesn't want cockatrices or hellhounds attacking his home from the forest, and announces that from now on he will be contacting the Adventurers Guild for help with protection. The man explains that the proper way to approach the Adventurers Guild for such matters is to... He says he hasn't been to the pond for a long time and is about to unload the bathtub. The man asks what happened. Okuda Kaigo says he doesn't particularly want to get into a fight, but if it's a merman, he can handle it, and says he's loading an arrow. The dog barks at the merman. Okuda Kaigo explains he was curious to test something and fires an anesthetic arrow, he adds. He says half a minute, and the fish is surprised and screams. He reports that it worked perfectly. He explains that the fish's shape is questionable, so he'll freshen it up first. He explains that, after all, mermans even look like fish internally, so perhaps they're edible. Okuda Kaigo reports that mermen are very popular as a potion ingredient, as he expected, and he also asked to see how to properly skin monsters. He explains that he could have found out what the ingredients are by tasting them, but it seems it would take a while for the anesthetic to fully wear off. He states that the daggers he enchanted have a fire effect and are great for survival, and then asks what would happen if he enchanted the dagger with a water effect. Okuda Kaigo explains that if you stick a water dagger into a flask, you can collect clean drinking water, calling it a rather convenient household item. He confirms that it's just water and asks to examine the dagger, which emits drops of water from the tip of the blade. He says that, considering the irrigation of the fields and the cattle bath, a lot of water will be needed, and he wonders how long it would take to build a regular barrel, but now he has a new source of water. He explains that it's worth making more of them for sale and for himself. He says he's looking forward to when... Okuda Kaigo says he fried the fish just in case, but it was delicious even without it. He explains that, unfortunately, there was no white wine, but it would be nice with a fruit ale too. The man explains that the fish looks like white fish, only from this world. Okuda Kaigo says, he says it's not so important to him why he's arguing with himself, but rather to earn money for a new order from the Adventurers Guild, just in case. He offers to go with him to town tomorrow to sell the new daggers. Okuda Kaigo announces that he's selling 2 Sarahs and 2 Margos, and explains that the water dagger emits water. The man says he'll buy 4. Okuda Kaigo explains that the two have begun arguing. The girl and the man are preparing to fight, and the dog is barking. The woman says Ash managed to settle everything and did a good job, and says that Margot apparently won the bet this time. The man explains that, one way or another, the bickering between the two is actually calming. He says it's Jew and utters the word price. Okuda Kaigo says he'll finish his business and come back for Ash. Ash tells Tav. Okuda Kaigo explains that when he worked at a trading company, he often had to deal with foreigners, but he couldn't get close to them because he didn't know many words to communicate, and because of this communication gap. He reports that he does not dare to get close to people even in this world. Okuda Kaigo explains that in this world, you can build connections without knowing most of the words, and it's a comfortable environment for him, where he can be confident in his words. He explains that he doesn't particularly memorize new words because, when he's talking, everyone will understand him without having to formulate them precisely. He reports that he was trying to appraise the item Margot gave him, and that the Hellhound's claws can be used for forging, but he'll have to stay home for a while. A few days later, he says he's finally finished the Hellhound's buckler, reinforced with metal and enchanted with claws. Okuda Kaigo announces that he's added fire resistance to his shield and reinforced it with metal, allowing him to fend off a Hellhound. He suggests testing his new sword. He then remarks that the power is too destructive and he'll have to make a new chair, after which he explains his current approximate understanding of the sword's power. He reports that recently, animals have been increasingly caught in traps with paralyzing poison and that the rabbit should be buried a little later, but the venison and boar should be cooked now. Then he notices that the bathroom is almost full and says that today is a good time to take a warm bath, adding, Okuda Kaigo says it's delicious, and the man says it's amazing. He says that he truly lives a carefree life now, and in his world, he wondered if he could become a farmer if he lived such a carefree life. He reports that the only remaining threat is from uninvited aristocrats and monsters, and a happy, uncommitted life. Okuda Keigo thinks they won't take him anywhere this time and asks if they're still planning on going. He explains that if they do decide to go, they should give them the potions and offers to take them. The other guy asks them to wait and then thanks Okuda Keigo for the potions. He reports that Mardo didn't come with him and asks what the reason was. He explains that he wanted to go and take a bath with Ash first, but it doesn't matter. He examines a box with many different ingredients. The man says he's giving everything Okuda Kei has. Okuda Keigo says he told Margo he needed to go and pick some herbs, and he went with him, which actually makes him feel better. Then Okuda Keigo suddenly shudders. He says there's a new monster. The man shouts, Kigo, onion. The man says he's meeting him for the first time, but Margo doesn't seem surprised at all. He replies, okay. Okuda Kaigo reports that the opponents were a kobold warrior and a gray bear, and that they were serious opponents, after which Kaigo's level increased from 11 to 12, increasing his physical strength, intelligence, magical power, skill, energy, agility, and strength. The man in the bathhouse laughed. He reports that they managed to get ingredients from 2 monsters, and Margo is separating them in the city. He thanks her and says goodbye. He sighs and explains that he just intruded on his quiet time, he learned a lot of new things, and it seems like he made a lot of new friends, he tells. Okuda Kaigo reports that he often sees oil lamps glowing from demon cores, which can be obtained from monsters, and explains that the lamp glows brightly with the core he obtained on his last expedition. He says the lamp glows beautifully and bids goodnight to Ash, who is sleeping. He explains that if there's no encyclopedia on this world, he can make one himself, and that it would be convenient to carry this book with him into town, wondering if it's possible to combine 2 effects obtained from monster ingredients. He then thanks Margo. The sound is emitted by a 2-headed creature. The text states that Keigo's peaceful life in Lacust is gradually returning to normal, but the threat of Tiki remains. Okuda Keigo says fortress, then uses Hellfire Roar. The man says, that's great, now. Okuda Keigo tries to attack, but the man says, it didn't work, and then says, well then. He strikes the enemy and reports that he's finding it easier to fight mermen. He explains that fire-based attacks are useless against water-based enemies, but water-based attacks work against fire-resistant armor. Okuda Kaigo says he's trying to avoid unnecessary battles, but without understanding how attributes and magic work in this world, he simply won't survive. So he's decided to conduct experiments on mermans who wield water magic. He also says he'll stock up on scales and meat while he's at it. He shouts, asking what the noise is, and at the same time wonders what's going on behind him. Then he repeats the question, what's the noise? Okuda Keigo announces that it's a snake and orders them to get out. A growl is heard at the same time. The dog barks and warns not to provoke him, and the man calls to him and shouts. The man tries to restrain the horse, which bolts forward and lets out a piercing bray. The horse gallops past the building, and a loud thud and the click of a locking door are heard. The cat says, ooh, and the man repeats that he's scared. The man says he was so happy about his victories over the mermen that he completely forgot he was wrong. The man explains he was wrong. The man asks him not to find him and says he hopes he doesn't show up here. Okuda Keigo says he was never able to sleep. He speaks to the snake, asking for help, and says he has to do something. He explains that additional traps need to be set around the house. He explains that he's already made a request for extermination for the adventurers and is wondering what else can be done. Okuda Keigo says he's boiled Giebel's poison and the cockatrice venom glands Margo gave him and hopes the antidote will work. Frankly, he's afraid to try it, and until he tries it, he won't know how it works. Okuda Keigo licks his spoon. He says the drink is weak and lively, then rates its toxicity as high and reports that even a drop on his tongue could easily kill him. He explains that he made Ash nervous and calls him his savior, to which Ash makes a sound. Okuda Keigo says this poison should help scare off the creature and asks for it to work. He says he's prepared all possible countermeasures, traps, medicine, and so on, but admits it's far from perfect. Okuda Kaigo explains that he's still feeling dizzy and asks for it to work. He says he can't sleep and that he's scared. He explains that his body isn't listening to him at all and that he needs to get it under control in the morning. Then he hears a dog barking and says he has a bad feeling about it, but he needs to check. Okuda Kaigo is horrified when he sees a dragon approaching. He declares that this is his death. The woman says they must retreat immediately. The armored man shouts that he won't retreat. He's surprised and asks what's going on. Okuda Kaigo explains that the spell creates protection against poison and asks not to worry. The man thanks her for her help and says they can now move forward. The girl begins casting a spell to strengthen her protection. At that moment, a snake appears, and Okuda Kaigo shouts that it's a snake. He says he doesn't understand what's going on and notices the dog barking. The man explains that if there's one thing he understands, it's that he's no use to them, so he'd rather leave the hard work to them. The man prepares for battle, while the woman and the guy with the dog stand by. The woman says he almost ate him. It's terrifying. The man screams that he's in pain. The man asks for help. The woman thanks him for the help. The woman says it's fine. The woman casts a spell. The girl uses magic, creating a powerful whirlwind. The man shouts, "He." The woman says the work was good. The man thanks her and says he's been saved. Okuda Kaigo explains that they were able to challenge the serpent. He just witnessed perfect cooperation and asks if they're comrades. The man explains that his request to join the guild was worth it. He says he managed to get some sleep. He reports that all his self-defense tools were completely useless and explains that he was on the brink of life and death, which means it wasn't a dream, and calls the incident a complete mess. Okuda Kaigo reveals that he and Ash are still alive, but Okuda Kaigo reveals his name. He says that it seems they heard about the serpent at the guild and came because they were worried. The man asks if Margot and Juno. Okuda Kaigo says he's fine and thanks him, explaining that everything seems fine. The man with the eye patch and the other guy say everything is fine, with the other guy supporting Okuda Kaigo, who sighs. A man with tattoos laughs in the bathtub. He thanks another man who passes him a mug. He explains that they've disturbed his time of peace, but maybe that's not so bad as he pets a furry animal in his lap. The men look at each other. Ash explains that this is his name, given to him by his master. He is a level 2 ash wolf cub with extremely slow growth due to the rarity of his species. Okuda Kaigo explains that he spends all his time with Ash. Ash explains that even when he sleeps, he finds the most comfortable place for him. The animal says its favorite food is meat, which its owner gives it, and it's very tasty. It tells the animal that the owner has a horse named Rosianta and a stupid chicken, but the chicken can't be eaten. The animal explains that the chicken prefers to eat fresh grass, while the stupid chicken. The cat explains that she and her owner do various things together, and that one day her owner was attacked by a terrible monster, to which he responded by frightening the enemy with his voice and threatening to burn it if it came closer. Okuda Kaigo asks where they're going today and then asks to be petted. He reports that one day the old man and the older sister quarreled over the master's attention, and the man orders them to stop the quarrel. The older sister squeezes the boy, who begs his little sister to spare him. He says that later, for some reason, the older sister squeezed him and the master of the country. Okuda Kaigo says that singing with his owner makes him happy, and he also loves singing, saying they sang Tadadan while sitting in the bathtub together. Okuda Kaigo says Tadadan, and the dog says wow in admiration. Okuda Kaigo explains that he's good at. The dog reports that when it brings a bone, its owner pets it. The dog explains that there's no water in its bowl. It says its owner is so stupid, and urges it to wake up. The animal states that it's very hot in this room, so hot that it faints, and explains that it's protecting its owner until he wakes up. It always senses danger and therefore warns its owner of it. Okuda Kaigo demands that someone big and tall come out, and the animal declares. He says that the owner is very kind and wants to be with him always. He explains that his name is Ash and he is the owner's faithful partner. Okuda Kaigo announces that a monster is approaching, and at the same time, a man with tattoos on his body calls the battle to a close. The man with the sword and Okuda Kaigo prepare for battle. In the upper right, a dog notices something and makes a noise, and a man with short dark hair feeds animals that are making noise. Today, under the protection of Margot and Juno, they gather herbs in the forest with Ash. Juno says their purpose is here, and Margot confirms. Okuda Kaigo says he wouldn't dare go into the forest alone. The man says they killed him, and it's easy. Okuda Kaigo explains how good it is to have friends. He speaks to himself and asks if he's being played, then is surprised by the appearance of the cockatrice and asks what it is doing here. After that, he makes a sound and falls backwards. Okuda Kaigo announces that they have changed their formation to fight Cockatry and that this time he will be in the vanguard with Tsuchit. Then a cry of "Fortress" is heard, followed by an explosion, noting that Kokatri's eyes have lit up and that an attack is about to begin. He says that in situations like this, you need to drink a potion, and thanks Margot. Margot says that's fine. He calms down and says, "Geez." Okuda Kaigo says it's about to hit. The man says yes. The man says woof woof and Okuda Kaigo woofs. The man says, "Good job, Ash." He announces that the dragon is attacking and warns them to evade. Several characters quickly react to the threat, attempting to avoid the dragon's strike. The man says yes. Okuda Keigo informs him that his level has increased, and his new stats are shown: level 1213, HP 2628, MP 1627, Vitality 1921, Strength 2527, Intelligence 7677, Agility 31233, Speed 2527. The man explains. The guy says he has some friends. The man thanks the guys. Okuda Kigo says the last time they saw each other was before the serpent attacked his house. The girl says she's fine. Okuda Kigo and the girl address each other by their first names. He says, "Of course," straight to the point. The girl looks at him with admiration. Okuda Keigo says there's no need to push yourself too hard and explains he's just trying to help. The bearded man says he's not used to things like this and asks not to be offended. Okuda Keigo explains he brought food and drinks for everyone to keep them going. Below, Okuda Keigo. He says he feels satisfied and tries to describe it. The man utters the phrase, "phew." Okuda Kaigo says he feels like he could spend his entire life drowning in the routine of everyday affairs, and that since he came to this world, every day has been different from the previous one. He reports that he was overwhelmed with work when he worked for the company. Okuda Kigo says things have gotten very quiet since parting ways with his friends, and he's quite selfish, but he enjoys his quiet life. He also says they'll probably have a lot of fun these days. Birds make sounds. The man says he just wants to be free. The top right explains that not every adventurer can defeat a dragon, and if Okuda Kaigo is attacked by a dragon, he will undoubtedly meet his end. Below, Okuda Kaigo explains that it would be wonderful to master magic. Bottom left, he explains that life isn't that simple. The dog is nibbling on the grass. He says that he recently realized something and that he is very talented in alchemy and forging. He explains that no one else sells weapons and potions of such quality, and even a skilled craftsman like Margot can't make things like that. Okuda Kaigo says he can't use healing magic, but he can restore health and remove negative effects with potions. He also says he can't use fire magic, but he can create it with a fire sword. He explains that it's all thanks to his appraisal skill, and admits that he shouldn't have underestimated it before. He explains that he's decided to focus on alchemy and forging, as this could be the key to success in this world. Okuda Keigo says that in the end, no matter what path he chooses, it all comes down to hard work. The cat makes sounds. The guy says that he seems to have fallen asleep from heavy thoughts. He explains that he still has a bow and confirms this. Okuda Kaigo thanks Master Kai. Master Kai says, "Pierce," and draws his bow. He says he hit the bullseye and reports that it was close. The man explains that he hit the target too. The guy says that he missed, but almost hit. Okuda Kaigo reports that this skill increases the penetration power of arrows and believes that it will be a good help against monsters that are not affected by a charged arrow. The man says that unknown monsters are still lurking in the area, and if he's not careful, he could lose his life. He says it's his turn now, and the man addresses him by name. He explains that although he's become stronger, Okuda Keigo encourages focus. He explains that it's much safer to hone your bow skills than to engage in close-quarter swordplay. He says, "Pierce." He explains that learning magic from scratch will give him a better chance of survival, and that training his bow skills is the most important thing for him right now. A gunshot is heard. Okuda Kaigo says great, and another man explains that, of course, it would be impossible to pierce the target on the first try. The piercing shot skill is reportedly acquired. A young man approaches a man named Dan and says he would like to create a submission request. The man thanks him and says goodbye. The guy explains that requests for submission are quite common. Okuda Kigo says he's okay with it, as long as it's not too weird. He explains that he makes a request when he sees a powerful monster near his house. Then he continues. Okuda Keigo says the bow looks pretty shabby. The man thanks him for the new bow, and he says how good it is that he was able to get it. The man tries to say something, and he thinks he's trying to say something. He asks the man not to close the store in broad daylight. Okuda Kaigo announces that they won't drink every day, and the man asks for it. He says that he is so carefree, although he can't say the same about others. Okuda Kigo reports that he can make a substance once the cockatrice's eye is dried, and explains that it's petrifying sand. He explains that the petrification attribute allows him to petrify targets and announces that he's finally made a weapon, a petrifying arrow. He reports that he can already make poison and paralyzing arrows, but he needs to separate them from the hunting arrows. Then he hears a dog barking and asks what happened. Okuda Kaigo says he can't believe this happened. He says they are nobles. The guy with the beard says that the interlocutor is with them. Okuda Keigo says he should go with them. The man says another man wants Okuda Keigo to go with them. Top right panel, the girl says she's sorry. Middle right panel, the man and girl shake hands. Bottom right panel, the man explains he's not satisfied yet and adds what follows. Left panel, the man says he's not satisfied yet and Okuda Keigo tells him to sit on top. The guy says it was close. The man in the hat says it's good that he made some good money. Okuda Kaigo informs him that Margot and Juno are here. The man says it's a good thing they're not with him this time. He says that this dismal march makes him feel sorry for the adventurers and orders them to return alive. He then explains that they have no connection with him and orders them to be beaten. Okuda Keigo says he's managed to make some supplies and hasn't yet evaluated the herbs he collected in the forest, explaining that he doesn't like testing poisonous plants, but he has to. He then notices that it's quite noisy outside and asks what's going on. The man screams in surprise, saying he's found Peruna's potion. He holds the man, who explains he doesn't know what's happening but is trying to hold the other man. The man says severe rigor has spread. The man expresses pain and says, "Oh my God." Okuda Kaigo reports that they appear to have been attacked by a cockatrice and explains that there are many injured. In the right column, he says the wound isn't deep and doesn't require hospitalization, and the man explains that the wound needs to be cleaned and bandaged. In the middle column, he says he brought water, and the man explains that the wound needs to be washed. In the left column, Okuda. Luckily, no one died, and apparently they couldn't reach the dungeon this time. Okuda Keigo says that he, of course, does not want to say this in front of the wounded, but he's outraged by what the hell happened here. He says his barn isn't a hospital. The man explains that there are victims here and apologizes. Okuda Kaigo informs that this nobleman is the real culprit and that he needs to be given money. The man explains that the food is delicious and he eats it with great pleasure. The man says he can't stop eating and continues eating. The guy says he's a dumb nobleman. The man on the right explains that he drinks from a bottle. Okuda Kaigo offers bread and tells them to help themselves, and the man and boy thank him. The man and boy also say thank you and express their gratitude. Three men shout at them to move faster and ask them never to come back. He says he wonders what happened to his horse and sighs that they are finally gone, then reports that the dog is making a woof sound. Below is a picture of a stone horse and text tells who. Byron explains that his family has long been established in Leicester and has a long history, and this time he will tell the story of a despotic nobleman from his personal servant, Pildea Dana. He explains that there is no one in this city who does not know his glorious name. Lately, monsters have become more active. The reason probably lies in the overcrowding of the dungeon in the forest, which explains the increased number of monsters around the city. Noble birth obliges, in other words, the duty of a nobleman. He reports that since it is his duty, he gathered adventurers and set out to conquer the dungeon, but this expedition ended before it even began. Okuda Kaigo reports that they encountered a normal cockatrice, but they immediately scattered and were useless. He explains that his beloved Melty-chan, On the right, the man says that they returned her safe and sound so that she would not be in further danger, and on the left, the man says that, however, Okuda Kaigo reports that when he returned to his room, he was suddenly overcome with sadness, and for 3 days and 3 nights, his pillow remained wet with tears. The girl says we need to wait for her, Melty-chan, the man says, phew. Okuda Kaigo says that no matter how many gold coins it costs, he will return to his former beautiful appearance. He says that it is the duty of his subordinates to work diligently for the good of his honor, and neglect of this sacred duty must be punished. He explains that these incompetent people have dishonored his glorious name and can only make excuses, so he sent them to prison without hesitation. The nobleman informs him that punishing his offending subordinates is one of his duties, which comes from his noble birth, and asks him to think twice before upsetting him. The top right text says there's a strange guy here who lives outside the city. He's different. The bottom left text explains that he knows his place and more. Okuda Kaigo reveals that as soon as he saw the man petrified, he healed him without hesitation and explains that, unlike the others, this man is actually useful. The woman reports that, in addition to the meat dish he called kunsei, it was the most delicious dish she'd ever eaten in her life. The man says it's excellent. Okuda Keigo says that next time he'll definitely make him his subordinate and take over the dungeon. The man says it's all for his honor. The man says that as a hero of this land, he will spread his name throughout the world and orders the monsters to wait for him because he is coming for them. First, the man laughs loudly and for a long time. Then the man continues laughing. After that, the man cries, turning to Melty-chan. Finally, the man sits silently on the floor. Megan says that he is one of the guild workers, and his name is Dan, and the man says that he has been very busy lately. Cockatrices, snakes, and many dangerous monsters have started to roam around the city. This is all definitely connected with the overflow of the dungeon. If nothing is done, the city's residents and surrounding areas will suffer. The economy has already begun to decline. It is reported that adventurers supported by the guild are actively exterminating monsters and protecting the weak. The guy says that by putting their lives on the line, they save other people's lives, but no one will become an adventurer for free, only an idiot. As much as Okuda Keigo would like to give decent pay for subjugation requests, the amount of money from the guild and customers is limited. He reveals that there is another variable that plays a major role in all of this and explains that it is the noble who rules the city. The man reports that this nobleman is ridiculously stingy and explains that even in this situation, he cuts the guild's budget. In the top right panel, a man explains that if there are good rewards, strong adventurers will appear who will take on missions. In the panel below, the man explains that if strong adventurers appear, monsters will not interfere with the economy, which, in turn, will help normalize taxes. The man says he went to the guildmaster for advice regarding the dungeon. Okuda Keigo explains that the reward they can offer adventurers is just a drop in the bucket of the required amount. He reports that a strange man has recently appeared. His name is Keigo Okuda. He explains that despite being an adventurer, he creates and offers huge sums for subjugation requests. He explains that although this man creates requests for rather powerful monsters, the reward with LLA. Apparently, he's close to Margot, Juno, and Sarasa, and I often see them together. He pays the guild well for requests, so he's worth keeping an eye on. Okuda Keigo says that in addition to being an adventurer, he also makes money selling items, though this is just his guess. He reports that after the incident with the nobleman, they met with their comrades, and upon learning that he was okay, they decided to celebrate and hope that this peace and days could last forever. The girl drinks and says that Sarasa knows how to drink, the guy next to her also drinks, and Okuda Keigo says that he didn't expect it, but Sarasa knows how to drink. He reports that he was asked what happened, after which he told them how he gave the money to the nobleman and asked them not to touch him. The guy explains that he spoke using broken language and gestures, but he's not sure that he was understood at all. The guy says, well, the man explains that he can definitely tell that they liked his story. Okuda Keigo reports that his usually quiet night is unusually noisy tonight, but it's not that bad. He says goodnight to everyone. He sighs and announces that he doesn't think they'll eat anything anymore. Then he and the others cover the sleeping people with furs. Okuda Keigo says, drink some water. The man says here. He says, to be careful. Okuda Keigo says he drank quite a bit last night, but feels refreshed, and that he used to have a lower tolerance for alcohol. He explains that perhaps using his appraisal skill and trying various poisons increased his resistance to negative states. Then Okuda Keigo remarks that when talking about poisons, he announces that he's found a new herb he recently picked in the forest and hasn't had a chance to evaluate it yet. He suggests licking it first. Then he explains that in his experience, this herb doesn't bode well and says, ugh. Okuda Keigo reports that he didn't feel numb and asks if it tastes like mint. He then says he wants to feel something and asks if he's crazy before calming down. The top right of the page shows a marbled grass item with a rating, explaining that it's an edible grass well suited for drying and brewing tea, noting that it's tea leaves. At the bottom right, he says he'll treat Sarah to some next time, and then. Okuda Keigo says that this is the first time he sees rain in this world, and then reports rain. He says he'll consider working in the forge until it rains. In the right panel, a man announces that the elemental arrow has been made and shows off an arrow with a medium-strength flame called the Hellfire Arrow. In the left panel, Okuda Keigo says that it's good that he imbued the Komchan with the water element and explains that since he can imbue the Komchan with an element, then the cat reports that it knew the rating. Okuda Keigo says he can enchant more than just weapons and armor. He explains that he needs more wood chips to make a larger plate and notes that it seems to collect water better than water blades. He explains that, if used correctly, this ability can make a multitude of useful things and lists a frying pan that emits fire. The guy says it's best to get back to work. Okuda Keigo says the dog is all dirty and asks if it likes the rain. The dog barks. He says how nice the damp earth smells and reports that after a couple of days the rain stopped. He explains that, phew, how refreshing. Okuda Kaigo says the bright blue sky, gently moving clouds, and soft sunlight are impossible not to be drawn to in this situation. He reports that he's already fed all the animals and watered the garden and is starting to feel sleepy. A guy is lying on the ground with his eyes closed. A dog is barking nearby. The man asks who it is. The guy says he has a bad feeling. The man yells Kigo. The girl says, The guy says that it really is again, and Okuda Kaigo says that he is serious. He says he'll try talking through the writing board and says, huh. The man says he's heard the name Beirun somewhere before and asks if it's just his imagination. Okuda Kigo reports that the guildmaster has chosen Margot, Juno, and Kai, the squad that defeated the serpent, and himself, to accompany the nobleman. A boy asks why this nobleman is so eager to conquer the dungeon. A man in armor explains something to the boy and another man. A girl holds a cat and listens. Okuda Kaigo explains that monsters are emerging from the dungeons due to overcrowding, and they're trying to reduce their numbers. He also says he understands this, and that he too benefits from the clearing, as there will be fewer monsters near his home. The man states that this idiot has no idea about the required forces, and forces them to follow his plans, and also says that, to put it simply, he is incompetent. Okuda Kaigo says he should avoid this expedition at all costs, but it would be good if they could capture the dungeon, since the city's strongest people would be with them, and perhaps they would succeed. He also says he thinks they should start preparing. The top right announces that this day has arrived. The bottom right shows a man in uniform thanking the adventurers. The bottom left mentions the guildmaster. Adventurers Guildmaster Shiraku reports that he seems confident. Okuda Kigo says, when the girl addresses him by name and explains that, since she's not very strong, she'll be in a support squad along with the healers. The girl examines the bracelet on her wrist. He says he's serious and that the bracelet is very expensive, and the girl says she'll take care of it. He thanks Saros. Okuda Kaigo says it's time. The man with the mustache addresses Okuda Kaigo, and Okuda Kaigo explains that he doesn't understand what his gaze means or what he wants from him. The man with the beard and the man in the hat say everything will be fine and confirm it. The girl with short hair explains that they have many strong people with them. He says that if they remain cool-headed, they can defeat even a snake. Okuda Keigo reports that they reached the dungeon safely, but it's strange that they didn't encounter any monsters along the way. He explains what this means. He reports that all the monsters have gathered in one creature, which emits a loud roar. The man shouts that they are advancing and orders them to move forward. A woman with a staff and a girl in a dress announce they are ready for battle. A man with a shield and short blonde hair explains they need to protect each other. A man with a mustache and a sword says he will cover the rear, and a man with a beard and a sword says he will attack. Okuda Kaigo says that, as expected from Kai, the guildmaster, and the adventurers, it was close. The man reports that they are strong, but definitely potions. He says that he will become a healer, and at the same time he says that he won't be able to do it as quickly as Takumi. On the far right, in the top row, a man announces that they must not let them pass, and Okuda Keigo says that they must hold them back at all costs. In the second row, on the right, a man explains that the monsters are stronger than expected, and the man on the left says that they will have to use all their strength. In the third row, on the right, a woman says, he says there are still plenty of monsters in the area, but they're already at their limit, and asks to talk to a man who's out of potions and herbs. The man swears and says he's out of potions and herbs. The man says they must sign and agree to retreat, calling his opponent a stupid nobleman. Okuda Kaigo asks what they're arguing about. A guy screams while punching a man in the stomach. The man reports the sound of impact, and another man reports the sound of pain. Okuda Kaigo reports that it appears he gave the order to retreat, and explains that they also failed to capture the dungeon this time. On the right panel, a man reports that even the strongest humans in the city couldn't defeat them. On the left panel, a man explains that the next monsters from the dungeon will be even stronger. The boy remains silent. Okuda Keigo explains that he can't allow himself to die because he has a goal. He says he needs to get stronger. The sounds of dogs barking can be heard. The guy with the dog says he's home and asks for a lick. The man with short dark hair says everyone did a good job. The man with short dark hair and another man admire the abundance of food, noting that Sarasa must have spent a long time preparing it all. Okuda Kaigo thanks Sarasa. Sarasa and the man with tattoos smile. The man in armor laughs while drinking from a bottle. Sarasa explains something while holding a plate of food. Okuda Kaigo and the other man laugh. He explains that even if they don't understand each other, their feelings remain. A man with short dark hair laughs, holding a mug, and another man hands him a mug. A girl with long hair says something with an irritated expression. Okuda Kaigo announces that the potion is ready, but the man remains silent. He explains that the forge was not created for what people think and says that he is also very tired, but okay. Okuda Kaigo says goodnight. He says it's already morning. Then he explains that he feels unwell. Okuda Keigo says he seems to have let his guard down around them and tells him when was the last time he slept surrounded by other people. The man says it's breakfast time and asks who's there. The man addresses Okuda Kaigo by name, and Kaigo thanks the guildmaster for his work. Kaigo notices that the bag is heavy and comments on it. Okuda Kaigo says the bag on top is stuffed with gold coins and asks if it's a letter. He then says he'll look at the appraisal. The translation states that Kaigo Okuda is receiving a reward and compensation for the unused potions and also expresses gratitude for his assistance. He says he understands what they wanted to tell him and thanks them. The man calls him comrade and hands him a heavy bag, which surprises him and says it's heavy. The man says he'll give it to them and names Margot and Juno. Okuda Keigo says he understands and agrees. Okuda Keigo explains that they're heavy. He says that in situations like this, you need to drink tea. The man says that it's time to get up. It's already morning. He explains that his hair has gone gray and that it's all because of the nobleman. The guy says it's delicious. The man says good job, and Okuda Kaigo thanks him. The man says see you later. The guy says they're leaving, and the man explains he has to be very busy. Okuda Kaigo says he hopes the nobleman will understand the truth of the matter, since they were unable to capture the dungeon even with such a large group, and that everything will be peaceful, at least for a while. Okuda Kaigo says goodbye and thanks everyone. The man says they haven't even had a proper rest, and he suggests throwing a consolation party. Okuda Kaigo speaks to Juno. A man with short dark hair and neat bangs stands next to him. A girl explains to the man with the mechanical arm that he shouldn't do that. He tells Juno that Juno has 3 feelings hidden deep inside. The girl says she's happy. The man explains that he is too. The snake makes a sharp sound. The guy screams, the man laughs, the girl says it hurts. Okuda Kaigo says he's glad they enjoyed the beef skewers and asks what shimoga is, a cow. He explains that they seem tired. Then Okuda Kaigo says the soup is ready, which is great. A woman says that the herb melena is good for hangovers. A tattooed man asks about shimeno soup. He says yes, yes. Okuda Kaigo says he doesn't drink alcohol, but a man with a tattoo on his shoulder says it's not alcohol, but an energy drink. He reports that, as usual, they eat a lot. Okuda Kaigo says goodnight, and the text says, see you tomorrow. He says it's good that the soup worked. The man with tattoos says he feels better. The man with short hair explains that they can move on now. The girl says she's grateful for the help. Okuda Kaigo says that since he had business at the guild, they went to town together, and come to think of it, he really wants to learn magic. He explains that he remembers the sorceress using a tornado to kill the serpent, and he definitely used wind. He explains that, of course, the guy asks for wind magic. The man says, okay. The man says that this is a dojo, and Okuda Keigo says, A man knocks on the door and tells Han Sensei it's magic, and the boy says he's starting to get nervous around Master Han. On the right, a man explains he doesn't think Master Kai has magic, and the boy tries to restrain him. In the right panel, a man with an artificial eye announces that he is the dark magic skills instructor Han. In the left panel, the man explains that he has likely been through many wars and battles, and a young man asks Han's teacher to teach him. Okuda Keigo explains that it is the wind, while simultaneously creating a whirlwind with his hand. The guy says he'll start by imagining the image in his head and says he's still inexperienced, but it's cool. He says the wind, like a typhoon, come, and repeats the word wind. Okuda Keigo says he's going and makes a sound of surprise. The man reports that after half a day of practice, he finally succeeded, but considers the skill too weak. Another man congratulates him and thanks him for the congratulations. A message appears stating that magic has been learned and the skill, wind, has been mastered. The animal screams at the wind. Okuda Keigo says that if he practices constantly, he will become stronger, eventually be able to drink his own potions and give it his all. He says he likes the breeze. The cat makes a kion sound. The man asks, what? The guy reports that someone has been caught, and Okuda Keigo says it's a blue wolf. He aims his bow at a small creature that makes a woof sound. Okuda Keigo says he's your kind, then says he doesn't seem to be hostile. He says everything is fine. He tells the wolf not to come again. Okuda Keigo says that wind, if used correctly, can be used to dry hair. He explains this while simultaneously touching his head with a towel. In the next panel, he explains that he's silent, watching the group of people. He says it reminds him that he didn't thank Sarasa for the bracelet and remarks that he should also invite Juno. The dog asks if he likes it. Juno is reported to be living in the city, in a tavern, where he was brought to consciousness. Okuda Keigo says that since he's been here before, he can now navigate more easily, and explains that the tavern and bar are located downstairs. Top right, a girl says she went to the counter first. Bottom right, a man apologizes and says something unintelligible. Bottom left, he says he understands something. Top left, he says, A guy with short dark hair and a neat fringe says, a man with a backpack asks if he's disturbing her. A girl greets him and wishes him a warm welcome. The guy asks where the room is, and the girl tells him it's room 2002. The guy says he's glad she understood him and that it's the second floor. Then the guy knocks on the door of room 2002 and asks if anyone's inside, after which he receives the answer that they're coming. The man turns to Okuda Keigo and says, Okuda Keigo tells him to wash his face, and the man explains that he's washing his face and says it's fine. Okuda Kigo thinks the man must have been through a lot and it's best not to bother him. He says it will be easier to write and says the man has a bracelet. The man thinks he is wearing a bracelet. Okuda Kaigo says he's offering to look for something for Sarasa as thanks for the bracelet. Sarasa stares silently at her tablet. He says it's good. Okuda Kaigo says he can't understand why he was tricked so easily and explains that he didn't mean to hurt anyone. The man says something is wrong with him. He says something is wrong with him. Okuda Kaigo explains that he's not the man they're looking for and asks not to be confused with anyone else. The man explains that Marco isn't him, but someone else, and asks not to be confused. Okuda Kaigo says, and the man says, He says that he didn't understand a word, but the feelings of the interlocutor are clear to him. Then he says, Okuda Kaigo reveals that a long time ago he had a silent friend who could listen to him when he was going through hard times. He says it's different for everyone, but the man laughs and covers his mouth with his hand. Okuda Kaigo reports that among those seeking help, few are looking for an answer to a nagging question. He says that in times like these people already have the answer in their hearts, and all they need to do is talk to someone to be told that they are not wrong. Okuda Kigo explains that from what he sees, he believes Juno has already been through a lot. He says that even if he doesn't understand what they're saying, he can still feel their pain, sadness, and bitterness, and that's enough for him. The man thanks Okuda Kaigo for today, and Okuda Kaigo says goodbye and informs that they will see each other. First, the wind makes sounds of Kion and Kia. Then he asks the animal for forgiveness and says he sees his magic growing stronger. The animal responds to Kigo, who addresses it. The man asks what's going on, and the girl asks what happened. Okuda Keigo says that apparently Margot hasn't thanked her for the bracelet yet, and explains that a woman's heart is incomprehensible. The woman reports that they were immediately thanked at the same time. He tells Juno to thank him. Okuda Kaigo reports that adventurers who can't stand the nobleman's behavior move their bases to other cities, and this must have happened back then in the tavern, but anyone in their right mind would have left far behind from such an idiot. Okuda Kaigo lies down and says he can't sleep. The man. He says he can't sleep and sighs. Okuda Keigo is silent, then says that it is scary. He says he's scared. He explains that people are creatures that contradict themselves. Okuda Keigo says that before entering this world, he had a desire to be completely alone. He turned off his phone and didn't respond to messages. Then he felt drawn to people again, and he returned to his normal routine. He also shares the same story with social media. He deleted his profile. The reason he wanted to move to the countryside was because he was tired of interacting with people at work. He thought he'd never interact with anyone again. Just looking at those fake smiles made him want to puke. The man reports that his desire hasn't changed even after he arrived here. He explains that he wants to be self-sufficient and avoid contact with people as much as possible. Okuda Keigo says he'd be happy with just a little interaction, and he's quite comfortable with these three. He says that he thought so, and, reflecting on everything, came to this conclusion. He explains that he believes that a person's worst enemy is himself, and the more a person does this, the deeper he sinks into darkness. He says that a person never stops thinking. Okuda Kaigo screams in pain and falls to the ground, covering his head with his hands. He then sits up and looks around, then sighs and says he feels like an idiot for fooling himself again. The guy says he's sure he's starting a new life here. The girl says the fake smile she's had for so long has disappeared. The man explains he's found something truly beautiful. Okuda Kigo says that his heart is at peace now, and the stupid relationship he had with these three will probably stay with him for the rest of his life. A voice announces that the morning forging is complete, and another voice says that this is how it is. Okuda Kigo says he'll make breakfast now. The man in the group responds with a disgruntled sound. The text says this is what's happening when they arrived. The guy says it was unexpected, but he doesn't think the same squad will be able to capture the dungeon. The man explains that they didn't even have time to prepare, and it's impossible. Okuda Kaigo says that, unfortunately, he has to force a smile in such situations. The man explains that when someone's anger crosses the line, their face loses all emotion. He says he's Keigo. The man asks what he is and what he wants from him. The man states that he will not let Kaigo leave and grabs him by the shoulder. The guy asks, "What the hell happened?" The man grabs the guy by the neck with a smile. Okuda Kaigo reports a surprise attack. The man makes a sound that suggests fear or pain. He tells them to run. The man warns them about their immobile legs and calls the fortress the devil. Another man calls out to Beirun-sama. He and the man agree and begin to run. The girl asks him not to notice her. The girl says everything is fine, and the man responds in kind. Okuda Keigo screams in surprise as a dragon appears on the battlefield and begins flying above the combatants. Warriors and mages on the ground prepare to fight the dragon, observing its movements and trying to figure out how to deal with it. He says they survived and asks if that's true. The man makes a sound like a stutter. Okuda Kaigo says yes. The man asks Kaigo if he's okay, and Kaigo says he's okay, but a man says he couldn't do anything, and another man says no. In the right panel, Okuda Kaigo states that he has something else to do right now. In the left panel, the sound of boiling can be heard. He says that if there are no problems, we can return to the city. The man says that in that case, we can rest peacefully and recuperate. He explains that we need to prepare food and wait for the others to discuss further plans. The man says that for now, we can cook and rest. Okuda Kaigo is silent. The man in the center says that there's nothing in this world that can't be bought with money, explaining that with money, you can get anything. The woman explains that even if someone can't fight, they can hire a bodyguard, and the man on the right adds that information can also be bought. The man in uniform says he can't afford to lose a single soldier, explaining that if any of them die, he won't be able to justify it to his subordinates. The girl explains that they must do everything possible to survive. The man in the apron says he's ready to help, and Okuda Kaigo says that even with magic and potions, he doubts they can put his arm back in place, and that the only consolation is that no one died. He says the fog is getting thicker today. Then he says he smells like blood and needs to take a bath. Okuda Kaigo says, "Please raise the bounty." In the upper right section, a man reports that a request for submission was posted in the guild, and he explains that he decided to increase the reward to attract more high-ranking adventurers. In the left section, a man explains that he was targeted, but he definitely died, and judging by Okuda Kaigo says this is bad, and asks how long these days of fear and anticipation of an attack will last. The man reports that the fog is getting thicker. He says there is no one here. The man asks if there is. Okuda Kaigo says he was thinking of going to Margot, but if you think about it, no matter where he is, if he is attacked, death is inevitable. He says he's trying to resist his fear and is trying to draw something, while scolding himself for not being able to stop his hands. He coughs. He explains that he needs to distract himself with something, that it's better not to trigger panic attacks, and says he doesn't even know if it's a good thing or not. Okuda Kaigo says it's already morning and explains that he couldn't sleep, and the cat says that he looks like he's barefoot. He says that maybe he should have gone to Margot and bent over like a dead man. The man asks if Keigo is home. Okuda Kaigo says that this voice. The man says that he is scared. The man says that it is a lower dragon. He agrees. Okuda Kaigo says he doesn't understand what's going on. The man explains that they must pass a security check to enter. Okuda Kaigo says he's willing to comply. The guy says he doesn't understand what's going on. The man and he nod in response. Okuda Kaigo says he feels a huge sense of relief. A man with tattoos and dreadlocks smiles, placing his hand on Okuda Kaigo's shoulder. A man with short dark hair leans toward Okuda Kaigo, supporting him by the arm. He reports that peaceful times have finally returned, and high-level adventurers have defeated her in another city. He explains that, as it turns out, this huge lizard didn't appear from a dungeon in the forest, but from distant lands and simply flew past. Okuda Kaigo reports that his heart feels so light, although who knows what other creatures might attack him. The man is surprised and asks what it is. In the upper right corner, he says it's a monster that lives near bodies of water, and clarifies that it got lost in the fog and ended up at his house, then asks for a rating. In the upper left corner, two men are discussing a fighting bull. One of them says it's a cow. The tattooed man says, "Okay." Okuda Kaigo tells him that after the fear disappeared, hunger appeared. The guy listens, silently. He says, "It's all because of Margot and Juno. They become too kind to me." He explains that maybe it's because he saw a nobleman's arm cut off. Okuda Kaigo says they left all the cooking to him. The man says one word, "Damn." He says he somehow didn't notice, but the fog has already disappeared and says it's excellent. The man talks about preparing a festive feast, listing mochinabe, steak, smoked meats, liver, and beef for every taste. On the right, a man with a mallet says that everything happened so quickly and he wants it too. On the left, Okuda Keigo raises his hand and shouts. He says it will be fun. The man says he is not going to give up. Okuda Kaigo says he can't sing, but he wants to try. His dog sings along with him. The sound of the blow is accompanied by an exclamation from the man, Ga. He says that he is snoring loudly. The man lies on the ground and makes loud snoring sounds. Okuda Keigo says he forgot about the shimeno soup and that he needs to drink it. The man says the guy looks terrible, and the guy says, oh. Okuda Keigo reports that this time he realized. The guy says he can't hide his feelings in front of them. He says he thinks they have the type of relationship where they can call each other best friends. Okuda Keigo reports that the soup didn't help, explaining that given how much he drank, it's not surprising. The man on the right says he needs to reheat the soup. He reports that the remedy worked this time and says he's never drunk so much. He explains that herbs do have amazing effects and welcomes those present, saying that they're here. Okuda Keigo says he'd like to be accompanied while he's gathering herbs, explaining that he feels they view his home as a place of relaxation. He suggests he stock up on various herbs. He says thank you, the guy responds well. The man looks into the frame. Okuda Kaigo tells the man they're in a dangerous forest and tells him to be careful. The man responds. Okuda Kaigo explains that best friends are, a guy explains what his heart feels. A man and another guy talk and smile. The guy says it's warm, and Okuda Keigo says it's great. He says this will last him a long time, and Junyu tells Kaigo. From right to right, from top to bottom, a man shouts that they are monsters, and Agu's scream is heard. The man in the helmet asks what happened. Okuda Kaigo says he will pierce. He says it might be from far away. The wolf growls, and Okuda Kaigo explains it's the same blue wolf. He reports that he didn't mean to steal someone else's loot, but his shot finished it off. He says A. He reports a level increase from 13 to 14, stating the changes in stats. Health increased from 28 to 31, mana from 17 to 21, survivability from. Okuda Kaigo thanks him for today. The man asks him to wait, and explains that he's leaving a request to subjugate a lower dragon as a precaution. Okuda Kaigo replies that it's fine and thanks him. He says, see you later, the man on the cart waves back. Okuda Keigo tells him to take care of himself. The man says that killing bugs is so calming and asks what he should do now. He says that he hasn't had a drink today and laughs at the same time, noting that it's interesting why. Okuda Kaigo says he used to say he likes solitude, but it's funny. He says he once felt warmth in his heart and that you'll never forget it. Now that everyone had left, the man for some reason felt lonely. The voiceover announces that all good things must come to an end, and explains that absolutely everything, the singing, the drinking, the dancing, the cool night breeze, the buzzing of bugs, all comes to an end. Okuda Kaigo says he is so lonely and scared that this night, soaked in loneliness, will never end. He says he doesn't understand what's happening to him and what came over him. Okuda Kaigo says that maybe it's all because of the recent stress he's been experiencing and that he needs a cup of herbal tea. He then explains that even though he knows the answer, he refuses to accept it and says that they're dealing with another troubled adult who refuses to let go of his loneliness. He says that his body is heavy and his vision is blurry. Then he says that it is already morning. Okuda Kaigo says it's hot and reports that it really is hot. He says he needs to jump, then says he wants to eat. The guy reports that it was unexpected. The cat barks, and Okuda Kaigo lies on the floor and says that the cat betrayed him. The man says he's the master of the Leicester Adventurers Guild. The man says his name is Shiraku. The man explains that the nobleman who runs the city has been mistreating adventurers lately, and a huge influx of complaints is being directed at their employee. The man says that, the man states that he can no longer stand by while countless adventurers give their lives in vain, and that he also refuses to allow the hiring of new workers. The man explains that one man continued to insist on cockatrice's submission. He tried to reach him, but to no avail. Okuda Kaigo reveals that the only ones who can handle cockatrice are Juno, Margot, and himself, despite the fact that he's an expert in healing and can eventually cure petrification. The woman explains that there's also a trio who defeated the serpent, and the boy explains, at least they can give a worthy rebuff to cockatrice, but who could have known that they would meet not one, but several? He reports that only thanks to him was it possible to avoid death, and words cannot describe how grateful he is to him. The man explains that Dan looked at him blankly, and that he was powerless in this situation. He also explains that the guild's honor was at stake, so, using their savings and the guild's, they were able to raise the required amount. The man explains that Byron himself only offered 5 gold coins as Okuda Kigo reveals that after this, he advised Biran-sama to surrender and says that he tried to persuade him many times. He reports that all of this even caused his hair to fall out, while a hole began to form inside his stomach, but for some reason the symptoms also began to manifest on his head. He explains that Byron-sama ordered him to gather the same people as last time and that he had to bend over again. Okuda Keigo says he even had to bother him again and apologizes for the suddenness of the situation. The man explains that Byron herself didn't even bat an eyelid at all his requests and regrets being such a lousy guildmaster. When Byron-sama dismounted from his horse to invite him, he was attacked by a lower dragon whose claws tore off Byron-sama's right arm. Byron-sama said that she would rely on him this time too. The man reports that he tried to fight off the monster to protect Byron-sama. Okuda Kaigo reports that they eventually managed to drive away the monster. The man reports that since then, Byron-sama has been hiding in her room, not leaving it, and food is brought to her door, and she even talks to the horse statue. The man explains that this state of affairs will certainly have a negative impact on the city. Heinrich, Byron-sama's son, says he spoke with her. Henry explains that he is the complete opposite of his father and is very wise. The man explains that this is how his restless heart found peace. Byron-sama reveals that his name is Byron-sama and that he is the one who lost his arm to the claws of a lower dragon. Everything around her began to frighten the girl, so she could not take a single step out of her room. To pass the time, Okuda Kaigo announces that he has ordered his love, Melty-chan, to be brought to his quarters. Beirun says his name is Beirun, and people probably think he's crazy. The woman reports that, confined to her room and terrified of everything around her, she suffers so much, and birds, beetles, and everyone else dare to mock her and will be punished. She explains that she's been devoting less and less time to her responsibilities. The woman says that it was worth trying to go outside. The guy says he's not crazy, but just afraid of everything around him. The hero tells him that his name is, all his servants have become cold towards him. The man says he can't sleep and wants to disappear from this world, asking everyone to just die. He says that the last time he got out of bed, he doesn't know which of them is real, and that the current and past him are one and the same. The guy says he recognizes his own face and thinks it's good, and also notes the terrifying grimace. The man says that's when the man calls out Melty-chan. Okuda Kaigo reveals that Shuriko was so worried about him that he even found someone who could remove her petrification, and after that incident, he wanted to live again. The man shouts, Melty-chan. The man reports that even in daylight he can leave his room to see his Melty-chan without fear. The man says he can finally remember what happiness is. He explains that the sleep problems have gradually begun to disappear, although Okuda Kigo still finds it difficult to look the servants in the eyes. The man explains that the wounds in his heart have begun to heal, albeit slowly, and thus he believes that everything will get better. The man says that in the past he went crazy, just as he himself became crazy after that incident, but now he is not crazy and is sure of it. Beirun reveals that his name is Beirun, and he has finally realized the pain that is in the hearts of people, and also tells how much it hurts from wounds and the loss of comrades. The man says that because of his inaction, many people lost their lives, and how he wants to give his past self a good slap. A man reports that he has committed so many atrocities that his entire body is overcome with trembling. The man explains that his son took over the city council, and that it was very difficult to figure out all the taxes and other things. The man says that at the same time, seeing his son in action, Shiraku cried with joy. A man says his son Henry is magnificent, but unworthy of being ruler. The man explains that the blame lies with him, and no one knows, but his son's gaze frightens him, and the symptoms seem to be getting worse. The man says that in the past he didn't feel any pressure and just did whatever he wanted, but now he feels like the burden could break him and he really wants to see this city thrive. Residents may think it would be better to remain insane, but this will not help them fulfill their duty, although it is easy to lock themselves in a room. The boy says he knows the residents and those he wounded. The man explains that he mustered all his courage and told Shirak that he would do everything possible to revive this city. The man reports that his body still trembles when he meets people, but he has definitely recovered to the point of being able to respond when addressed by name. The man reports that Shuraku once came to him and apologized. He explains that, apparently, his son had increased the monster-slaying tax and had teamed up with the guild to solve all these problems. Okuda Kaigo tells him that it would be great if he continued to rule the city, but Shuraku is waiting for his consent, and at the same time, he realized how much pain and suffering he brought him. The boy explains that he doesn't understand how he could make him bow his head before him, and the man says that he now understands all his pain. The guy says he's sorry. The man explains that one of the tasks was to make someone bow their head, something he only realized recently. Okuda Kigo explains that he was worried but didn't let it stop him, and that as a person he made many mistakes. Now that I think about it, there are still a lot of people he needs to apologize to. The man says he includes those innocent adventurers he sent to prison and thinks many of them hate him. Okuda Keigo reports that he's caused a lot of trouble all over the city and, as Shiron said, it would be a good idea to leave right now. After this, the man reports that he began to feel like Henry was avoiding him. The man says he thought the other was going to raise taxes, but the other said it was the guild's responsibility to keep the city safe. The man explains he doesn't know what the other is thinking. The man states that this is the result they came to, and explains that although he might not have done this out of respect for him, the woman says she can't understand her son and admits she has failed as a person. A man explains that if his son becomes like him, using his power to harm the world and hurting others, then he, as a father, will guide him on the right path. Another man says it's his duty as a father. Lester von Bayron reports that he is able to walk around his residence and its surroundings, although he is not fully recovered. He explains that he's been around every neighborhood and apologized, and that he wants to get along with everyone. He says he's finally realized how difficult that is. A man asks to take care of Melty-chan, and another man agrees to do so. The text states that he tried his best, but nothing will change if he locks himself in his room again. Okuda Keigo reports that he has a very reliable guard and thanks Tony for his protection. Tony says that this Byron will fulfill his duty as a nobleman and is ready to atone for all his sins. Byron confirms this. The woman says it's a canned peach and hopes the recipient gets better soon, to which the man thanks her, calling her mommy. Okuda Keigo lies on the floor and says that this is a precious memory. He says that sleep is such a relief and that the fever has gone away. Okuda Keigo reports that he lay in bed for several days after losing consciousness and eventually came down with a fever from exhaustion. He apologizes to the guys and explains that he wanted to cook them something to eat before he collapses, and the girl says that she's not worried and is already fine. Okuda Keigo reports that, fortunately, there were no customers during his absence. The man remains silent. He says that, to be honest, he thought he would die completely alone, and also explains that the word kodakushi refers to a situation in which a person dies alone and their body is found only after a long time. Okuda Keigo says it's a shame he can't talk to his mother and wonders if she was saddened by his death. He explains that she probably thinks he just ran away and says it hurts. He says that although the fever has gone down, he still needs to rest. He'll relax today and make a couple of potions. He hopes Margot and the others are doing well, and after everything that happened, he realized how important those around him are to him, while admitting that he's so useless. Okuda Keigo says he hasn't seen June in a while. He notices the fire and sits nearby, listening to the crackling flames. Then he notices the sound and asks what it is. He explains that he just woke up from his illness and says that he is being invited to a mission of subjugation right now. The man asks for forgiveness and says that everything is fine. The guy tells Lester and explains it's an assessment. The man says, and calls it an assessment. Okuda Keigo says good luck and asks if he's leaving already. The man replies, see you tomorrow. Okuda Keigo says he's found out potions can't cure the fever, so he should go to the hospital. He explains that Juno said there's a doctor in town. He reports that he has prepared quite a few potions. The man asks Juno if he is just coming from hunting. Juno addresses Kigo by name. Okuda Keigo explains that he went to town first to get the medicinal plants and food and asks if he's going on a mission. Okuda Keigo says it's all for him. Okuda Keigo thanks him and says thank you very much, and the other guy confirms. He says he needs to thank him, but right now he only has potions and says he knows. The man invites Okuda Keigo to stay there for the night. He agrees. It's worth admitting that it's so calm, and it's great when there's someone nearby, Okuda Keigo reports. He says that especially in such difficult times, he is glad to have a friend. The man expresses joy and gratitude for the friendship. Okuda Keigo says that Juno told him that a lot of things happened while he was recovering, and expresses his joy that the three of them didn't abandon him. He says he should stop being lazy, but he needs to get a good night's sleep today. Okuda Keigo reports that he feels much better after a good night's sleep and says his body is stiff and needs to stretch. The man says goodbye, thank you, and see you later. Okuda Keigo reacts with surprise to someone's call. He says it's that idiot nobleman. He explains that apparently he didn't bring any adventurers with him this time, and it's best not to tell him that the three of them are going into the forest together. The guy says he's sorry. The man responds with surprise. Okuda Keigo asks what they want from him and notices that the bag is heavy, containing about 500 gold coins. He asks what it is and asks for it to be repeated. He says it's compensation for the trouble he caused and notes that it's truly incredible. The man explains that it's related to their last meeting. The girl apologizes, and the man says that apparently this idiot nobleman has become decent. Judging by his posture, the man is genuinely remorseful. The man says the nobleman's threat has passed, he has no reason to refuse, and offers to treat him to something first. The man asks for a minute's wait. Okuda Kaigo says this scene sounds familiar, and says they apparently enjoy smoked meat too. A man in armor and another man fight over a piece of smoked meat, and Okuda Kaigo eats it while watching them. He says he's almost ready. He reports that apparently a lot happened while he was in bed. The man explains that his bodyguard's name is Tony and that the nobleman noticed his son. Okuda Kaigo explains that it's a whole roasted hare with garlic, salt, and herbs. He's a nobleman, so it should suit his tastes. Okuda Kaigo notes that the man's expression doesn't match it. The man says no one could have expected such a reaction, and explains that the cooking was worth it. The man says, "Oops," when the dog squeezes its paw. Okuda Keigo says, not to worry, there's food for him too, and the dog barks. The man responds with a question. The guy offers to add more and advises eating vegetables. The man says the road doesn't lead to the city but to the forest. The man says this is a stable. The man asks them to wait. Okuda Kaigo says he's tired and explains that they look like ordinary drunk men. He then says he's super cool and thinks he should give them some when they wake up. He says he knew this would happen, but they still look terrible, and explains that he is a nobleman. The man says goodbye and tells them to take care of themselves. Okuda Kigo says that now that he has saved up a lot of money, he needs to think about how best to spend it. He says they should visit a merchant he knows. He explains that they need to install crossbows and stone walls around his property, and the woman adds that stone is much stronger than dirt. The man says he'd like to have a bathroom and a bedroom. He explains that he's afraid and tired of living in a chicken coop. Okuda Keigo says they have reached an agreement. He reports that, with the help of his friends, he met with artisans and material suppliers. He also says that he met with Dr. Kishiwu Sensei and doesn't know the level of medicine in this world, but he believes that having a doctor is a good thing. He says that he asked Sarasu to deliver the materials he purchased. Okuda Kaigo says he should make some smoked meat after he gets home, and that he never thanked them for their help. The man and woman chat. The man says he can never return to the life of a hermit. The girl says, "Thank you guys so much." The man and girl stand next to two other men. Okuda Keigo explains that this is a protective wall, a bed, and a bedroom. He then explains that several days have passed. The guy announces that this is his fortress and calls it Bay. He explains that making your wishes come true is really cool and hopes that the flying lizards will stop looking at him like a piece of meat, and the snakes too. The man thanks for the help. Okuda Kaigo offers a drink to a man, who replies that Sarasa isn't there. The man says Kaigo is right on time, addressing him by name. The guy asks if he's hiding from her and says he's curious about what's going on there. The man calls out to Keigo and slams his fist into his palm, and the girl exclaims. Okuda Kaigo says, "Let's shake for the completion of the construction," and he and another man clink mugs of drink. He says he's had enough and tells them he drank with his best friend until he passed out, which he thinks was a good excuse to drink. He tells them he didn't drink the shimeno soup again and calls them hopeless adults. First, in the top right, a man says he has a splitting headache. Then, in the top left, a man explains that he thought not drinking the shimeno soup was a fatal mistake. In the bottom left, an animal makes a noise expressing displeasure. The man reports that the nobleman is not holding a water blade in his hands. Okuda Kaigo says he's tired and wants to rest for a while. He says he's become lazy again and sighs. The text reports that after various upheavals, calm days have arrived. Okuda Kaigo reports that it's been a few days since his house was finished, and with the stone walls came a sense of security that has made him lazy. He explains that once the feeling of danger subsided, the 10% of his usual energy use dropped to 3%. Okuda Kaigo says he still has some left. He says that this is how he can sleep and wake up whenever he wants, and reports that it seems like his dreams have come true. Okuda Keigo makes a sound while lying on his bed. The adjacent panel depicts the roof of a house against the backdrop of a night sky with a full moon. He says it's not even dawn yet and reports that he woke up too early, perhaps because he slept too much yesterday afternoon. Okuda Keigo reports that he woke up earlier than everyone else and that even the animals are still sleeping. He says that such precious moments of peace and quiet as now. Okuda Keigo says it's worth using something to gather your thoughts. He reports that he is pleased with the reciprocity of Juno's feelings for Saris. The guy says it would be easier if he found someone else, but he wonders if he's given up. The girl explains that it looks like she has feelings for Margot. The guy says that, however, Okuda Kaigo tells him that Juno is a good guy and doesn't think he's been deprived of female attention. He explains that Margot is still running away from Sarasa's persistent advances. He says success is just around the corner and everything seems to be going well. Okuda Keigo reports that something else happened to Byron-sama and explains that the loss of her arm could be one of the reasons. He says the gold he received as an apology was used to build a stone wall and his compensation simply saved him. Okuda Keigo says that there is no need to hold a grudge against him and adds that yes, he says he's much more interested in the son of the man who runs the city. He explains that, according to Margot and the others, this man is the type who abuses his power. He says he doesn't want to deal with the nobility, but if something happens, he'll do everything he can. Okuda Keigo says he met many people, Secretary Dan, Guildmaster Shuraku, Kai-sensei, and Han-sensei, who taught him useful skills, 3 adventurers and a stonemason, and not to forget the artisans who built him a house. He says that in the past world he was just trying to survive, and he didn't have time to think about those around him, but so many people took care of me. Okuda Kaigo reveals that no matter how much people deny it, he cannot do without the help of others, and reveals that he refused to admit it until the very end. By the way, there is also something that he cannot forget. Okuda Kaigo tells Ash not to change and stay the cutest fluffball in the world. Ash meows. He says the days are getting shorter, autumn will soon arrive, then winter, and as soon as the first snow falls, he'll have to ask Margot to put up a fireplace. He says he'll soon be able to take a bath and watch the snow fall. He says he's been doing nothing for the past few days and he needs to start a lawsuit. Okuda Keigo says it should be around here somewhere and that he remembers leaving it there. He then announces that he found it. After that, he explains that it looks like it's working and that he's using a local worm as bait. He says he'll try it now. The sound of cutting air accompanies his action. Okuda Kaigo says that it looks like there are no monsters here, and for the first time he sits so calmly by the river. He says he caught something. Okuda Kaigo says it looks like ayu and explains that it can be made into sashimi if it's parasite-free. He explains that his experience cutting fish in Japan has finally come in handy and says we'll see how it tastes. Then Okuda Kaigo says, like this. He says he doesn't even know how best to cook the fish salt, fry, or make sashimi, and that he needs to catch more. The man rates the fish as very tasty and confirms his expectations. Okuda Kaigo says that the fish in the barrel are moving and splashing, and then he explains that he caught the fish. He says he caught a butterfly, but the dog says it's not a butterfly, but a moth. Okuda Kaigo says he fell asleep. He says he's glad they're okay. He says it's time to wrap things up. He announces that he's leaving, turning to Rocinante and shouting, Nigga! Okuda Kaigo says he's glad to see them, and the man on the cart says the boys have arrived. The guy says they're going to have a drink. The man shouts that they're going to have a drink. He explains that he sees them getting ready for a party and says it's a coincidence that he caught a lot of fish. The guy says it's going to be hot today and offers to have a beer. The man in the bathhouse says it's good. Okuda Kaigo says he's never seen raw fish as food in the city and wonders if they'll like it. The man says he'll leave the salting for the fish while he makes the sashimi. The man explains that once he adds the garlic, he should put them in. Okuda Kaigo says he announces that food is served and asks for a pour. Okuda Kaigo says to try some more sashimi. The man asks about the plucked fish. The woman answers affirmatively. He says they should show it to him, asks for some lemon juice, and says everything is fine. The man explains that, judging by their faces, they've never seen anything like it. The girl asks about the sashimi, and the man confirms. He says the sashimi is very tasty, and the girl. Okuda Kaigo explains that he's scared. The girl says the same, and the man says he's scared. Then the girl and the man react with surprise. He says he's glad they liked it, and suggests they don't be shy, as there's still plenty of food. The man asks Juno what happened. Juno explains that he mistook sashimi for shoyaki. Okuda Kaigo tells Margot that she, a girl, feeds a man with a spoon. He says, "Yum." The woman says it's delicious. He and the guy hold the food in their mouths in silence. The man with the mask says a short greeting. Okuda Kaigo tells Juno that he should swoop in because it will bring him back to life and asks if it tastes good. He says the shiaki is delicious and it's sashimi. He reacts to another guy asking, surprised, yes. He says that since that's the case, he needs to liven things up somehow and shouts, "Let's sing and drink," expressing a desire to lighten the mood, while the other guy, Okuda Kigo, says he understands, and the other man confirms it. Apparently, Margot and Sarasa are going to get married. Considering how sweetly they were stealing yesterday, it's not surprising. He congratulates, and the girl thanks. Okuda Keigo reports that Ju looks devastated and says he'll take a look. Okuda Keigo explains that they apparently want to hold the wedding ceremony at his house in 2 days, inviting only a few people, and notes that it's unexpected, but he doesn't mind. He announces that the guest list includes everyone who is here now, plus one more person, Elsa, Juno's girlfriend. He exclaims in surprise. Elsa says something, holding an object in her hands. Okuda Keigo says all the consolation and pity from yesterday were in vain and asks why the hell he has a girlfriend. The man says that since his two best friends are getting married, it's worth celebrating properly. The man and the cat say goodbye, the man thanks him for everything and says he'll see him again, and the cat replies, he says that in 3 days they need to prepare a bath, entertainment, and food. He says that since he was asked to help, he will start with cooking, adding that they love fish dishes. He explains that he feels sorry for the boys, but they need their help. And so, their wedding day was approaching. The man says that there is a good bite. Okuda Kaigo says the yakitori is ready. All the dishes are filled with his love and care, as is the premium breaded chicken, and he is sure you will like it. The man announces that the fish he caught that morning still needs to be cooked, and turns to Okuda Kigo, who tells him that the heroes of the occasion have arrived. He says welcome, and the man explains that, as he thought, the aura of the two feels completely different today. The man says it's Lady Elsa, the guy says it's nice to meet you. Lady Elsa says good afternoon. The man says, ah. Okuda Kaigo says he thinks he's seen the girl somewhere before. He says she's the daughter of the owner of the tavern where he lives. He says she's too good for a brat, and calls him a lucky bastard. A man with short dark hair and a neat fringe, adjusting his hairstyle, says, Okuda Kigo congratulates Juno and says he's genuinely happy for him. Juno thanks him. Okuda Kigo says he knows how much pain Juno has endured. He announces that it's time to begin the final preparations. A man with an eye patch says something to him, who asks him if he's in a hurry. A girl in a black dress explains something to a girl with long hair, who answers her. The man on the right is hanging up fabric. The man says he's not going to give up and laughs loudly. The man takes the sword in his hand. Okuda Kaigo says, A man with a tattoo on his arm and wearing an apron expresses surprise. A girl with long hair and a girl in pigtails look at the man with the tattoo. A guy in a suit stands behind the girls. The man says that someone he has never seen before has appeared and expresses surprise. The guy with glasses says, oh, and asks if Margot has turned pale. The man with the tattoo on his shoulder bows his head. Two knights stand nearby. Okuda Kagego says he doesn't really understand what's going on, but only a savage could ruin such a special day as this. The Blue Wolf reveals that he is a proud hunter of the forest. He recounts how their leader was once killed by a high-ranking human who also took his cub. It is reported that this man is really strong and uses strange magic, and also that I would easily die if I attacked him without preparation. The voice on the right says that they can't do anything because the leader is dead and the hero has been taken by a man, and the voice on the left says that all they can do is watch over the hero from afar. Okuda Kaigo says that apparently the man isn't treating you badly and is even protecting you. He explains that in this world, the strongest survive, so there's only one thing loyal beings like them can do. Until that day, we will dedicate our lives to you and your protector. Upper right, the man explains that from time to time they will drive away creatures that could harm them both. Bottom right, the man explains that he once made a huge mistake when, while watching them, he fell under the influence of strange magic because he got too close and he couldn't go. Okuda Keigo says that when he saw how they protected him with their body, he was so touched that his heart started beating faster and it surprised him. He reports that in a world where it's kill or be killed, this man treated his wounds, and he was once again convinced that this man is special. Okuda Keigo says that one day, when they decided to go fishing at the lake, as always, they guarded this area from wild animals until a bear came and was about to attack them. A group of animals fought with all their might to drive away the enemy. The man reports that they fought with all their might to drive him away. Okuda Kaigo reports that after they finished, they came back to see him sitting in the man's arms and says it was touching. After a fierce battle, they were resting away from him. Before they noticed he was nowhere to be found, at the campsite, they found several caught fish and a wooden cup with a potion. The right dragon says that this person knows everything. The left dragon admits its defeat. The wolves say they are intelligent creatures of this forest and call themselves blue wolves. They explain that even now they continue to guard the man's territory and hope that he will grow strong. Elsa says her name is Elsa and she runs a tavern and bar in the city of Leicester, but says they need to hurry. The guy explains that because adventurers aren't very rich, they can't afford their own homes, so there's a tavern where he can offer them the cheapest lodging in the area. The man says the adventurer also often uses their services. The girl says she's known Juno and Sarasa since childhood and has been in love with Juno for a long time. The second girl says Juno is too ugly. Juno screams at them to look at his mare. The text explains that Juno liked Sarasa, even though the girl was in love. The man says he can't do anything but watch from the sidelines while Juno's heart breaks in pain. He explains that Sarasa is in love with Margot, and the merchant and the artisan who forges weapons and armor are truly a perfect match. The woman says, "What a fool." Okuda Kigo explains that the adventurer's body is his source of income, but he gradually lost more and more weight. The girl says she won't leave until the man eats, and the man asks her to shut up and leave him alone, explaining that she didn't oversalt the soup. The girl says she made him eat as much as she could, no matter what she told him. The girl sighs and says, "Haha," then explains that every time she looks in the mirror, she notices her freckles. On the right, the girl explains that Sasara's beauty lies beyond her appearance and says she knows firsthand what a good person Sasara is. The girl says she can't help but envy her, but her love will never fade. The man stands silently nearby. The girl says that now she has given up, but one day, she says, Okuda Kaigo tells Juno he regrets letting her become his girlfriend. Juno says she was so happy she couldn't hold back her tears. He reveals that they had a heart-to-heart talk. Just as Margot was able to let go of his deceased wife, Isabella-san, Juno was able to let go of his feelings for Sarasa. The girl says she'd be happy to. She explains that she's still troubled by his long-standing feelings for Sarasa, but now he knows about her feelings, and it was the happiest day of her life. The woman says that today is the day of Margot and Sarasa's wedding ceremony. She made her favorite shoes and dress, and also didn't forget about the earring that Juno gave her. The girl says she's ready and explains that she didn't hide her freckles with makeup because Juno said he liked them. She says she's decided to love herself just the way she is. The woman announces that the wedding will be held at the home of Keigo-san's friend. She recounts how Keigo-san once visited them at the tavern and left a lasting impression with his black hair and kind gaze. Okuda Kaigo says his puppy was super cute, and he also says that, come to think of it, he'll be able to see that puppy again and can't wait. The girl laughs. Lord Henry announces that he is a nobleman from the city of Leicester and the new ruler. The guy laughs and says hehehe, then says that a few days ago his father finally handed over power over the city to him. The man says people called him a tyrant, so he tried his best to show that he was different. The fact that his father went mad became a perfect reason for him to act, and Okuda Kaigo continued to win over other people, his father's supporters, influential people, and ordinary people, which strengthened his position. The man says he can't stop laughing and that the feeling is simply incredible. He explains that people have called him wise, that he has finally become the most important person in town, and that if he calls white black, then so be it. The man laughs. Okuda Kaigo says that power is so sweet, he'll do anything to hold on to it, and if he so desires, he can soar to the skies right now. He then asks everyone to continue working for him until they die and rejoices in taxing everyone heavily. He explains that in the end, he's completely covered. The man says that part of the funds will go to supporting the Adventurers Guild and the army. The man explains that his father tried to take power from him when he increased taxes. Okuda Kaigo reports that he was able to quell his father's ambitions and return the reins of power to him, and explains that he now understands what it means to hold the golden goose in his hands. The man explains that now that the problems are behind him, he needs to consider his next step. The guy says, "Oh," and then explains that after studying the city's economy, he noticed that some weapon shop was selling fire and water daggers like hotcakes, thanks to which the city's economy was revived and began to function stably. The man says that here they are, and at the same time announces that these are his golden eggs. The shop owner's name is reportedly Margot, and he's a blacksmith. Margot says it's an interesting thing and laughs. If he can create such a weapon, the man says he can't let it go. The man says it's time to reap the fruits of his labor and can already smell the money. Okuda Kigo reports that according to his subordinates, Margot has not sold such weapons for a long time. In other words, he got them from somewhere. The man says that they are closed and asks Heinrich-sama to look here, to which Heinrich-sama responds with a question. The guy in the cart says everything is wonderful. The man says it's just wonderful. Okuda Keigo reports that he and his comrades have left the city. The man explains that the location they're heading to may shed light on the source of those unusual daggers. He says that he needs 4 of them to go after them, and the other man replies that there is. The man laughs, and another man says it's time to pay the bills, and that Margot will pay him double. A man reports that a guest was not invited to the party. The man tells the story's title and chapter number. Okuda Kaigo says something strange is going on. The girl asks, "What's going on?" The man and the boy silently look in the same direction. The guy says what it is. He says, "A." The guy tells him not to come in. Okuda Kaigo says this isn't his house and orders him to understand that. He says the guards are coming out. The man says it's déjà vu and asks if it's an aristocrat. The other man explains that the guy says he'll sue for trespassing and arson, and calls the other guy crazy, asking where he's so scared. Okuda Kigo yells, "Hey," and stabs a log, and the guy reacts with a cry of, "Oh yeah." He says that, in that case, the man in armor explains that he doesn't know what's going on here, but making comments to someone more influential is useless, and Margot's face confirms this. Okuda Kigo says sashimi is the greatest weapon. He suggests trying this. A man in a fur cape and glasses calls Heinrich. Heinrich, on horseback, reacts sharply. Okuda Keigo explains that everyone is arguing over him, and that he seems to be Byron-sama's son, as expected of his parents. The man says he needs to do more. Okuda Keigo says he understands. He tells them to listen carefully. The man says that, be that as it may, today is an important day, so he asks them to calm down, and the other man turns to Keigo. The guy says they're already full enough. The man and woman are eating. A guy and a man are simultaneously discussing what it is, and the man is cursing. The man says that, come to think of it, the more people, the merrier. Okuda Keigo says he's glad you liked it, but he should leave it to others. The girl asks if it's possible, and the guy replies he doesn't know and suggests trying inviting them. A guy announces that he's inviting Margot and Sarasa to their wedding. A man asks if he's really inviting them, and a group of men agree. Okuda Keigo says that somehow everything has calmed down and sighs with relief. The man with the eye patch thanks Keigo, and Keigo replies that it's nothing. The man says he didn't think he'd have so many helpers. The man explains that now is definitely not the time to fight. He says he just happened to be passing by and didn't see anything. The man explains that preparations for the party are in full swing and adds that even these guys are helping out. Okuda Keigo announces that the time has finally come. The man explains that Margot and Saris. He tells this to the girl. The guy on the right announces that the wedding has begun. The girl on the right says that it really has. The man in the center explains that he will go with the bride, and the girl in the center remains silent. The man on the left says that he will watch them, and the man with the beard on the left says that everything will be fine. Okuda Keigo reports that it's rare to see Mardo in a jacket, and the moon-colored dress perfectly highlights Sarasa's beauty. A man says he is your world. If he is the earth, then she is his sun. A girl accepts a bouquet of flowers. A man puts a ring on a girl's finger, then the girl kisses the man. Okuda Keigo says he can't help but smile when he sees a girl happy. The man tells her they should keep going so they don't get late. A guy with short dark hair and a neat fringe, a girl, and other people congratulate him, shouting, "Hooray!" A man with curly hair approves. A man says that this is what weddings are like in this world, and another man says that he has never seen anything like it. Okuda Keigo is holding a dog and smiling. A man behind him is giving a thumbs up, and a girl with braids is holding a bouquet of flowers and smiling. The girl is trying to catch the bouquet being thrown by the man with the bouquet behind his back. The girl reports that, without realizing it, everyone was smiling. The atmosphere suddenly changed, and he reports that they went straight to the party. Okuda Keigo tells the gluttons to eat sashimi and chicken. The man says that even for improvisation, it's not very good and asks what the heck that is. He says he's been to many such events before when he was a merchant, and hands the drink to the man in the fur-collared coat, saying it's for him. The man in a tie explains that there were also games with stockings on the head, which gives you goosebumps. Okuda Keigo says it's good that there are no such contests in this world and turns to a man named Keigo. Keigo asks if he's next. The man explains that there should be a wedding song at the wedding, but something is bothering him. The guy says, and the man says he'll sing. Okuda Keigo says he drinks alone and is anxious, but songs are incredible, and even if you don't speak the language, you can feel the song's meaning in your heart. The man says all his friends have run away. The girl explains that everything is fine in their lives, and they've become henpecked. He reports that this is how they told him. Okuda Keigo says it's from the bottom of his heart. He tells Margot and Ross. A girl and a guy are standing on stage. The girl says, "Congratulations." People to the left and right of the stage applaud and raise their hands in approval. Okuda Keigo says goodbye. The man on the cart says goodbye, and the girl says, "See you later." He says, "Ah," and then says, "Damn guys, he's going to take them all down tonight." Okuda Keigo says the night breeze is so nice and sighs. He says that all this fuss was like a dream. Okuda Keigo says, no, not today. A lot has happened since he got here. He explains that people sometimes contradict themselves. He explains that by gradually driving ourselves to extinction, we close ourselves off from others. Even someone like him was able to find friends. The boy speaks to the boat. He says that, having come all this way, he has found those with whom he wants to share the best moments of his life. Okuda Keigo informs Juno and Margot. The girl says that they say that wives are smarter than men, and says that this also applies to Sarasa and Elsa. On the top right, a man explains that this is, of course, the cutest creature in the world. On the top left, a man explains that there are others. Okuda Keigo says everyone was captivated by the newlyweds' smiles, including him. He describes it as a circle of happiness, with Margot and Sarasa at the center, and explains that he's never seen anything like it in Japan. Words take the form of either a blade or a mirror. Sometimes we hurt, and sometimes we. Okuda Kaigo says it's easier to decide everything yourself than to rely on others. He explains that his only defense is regretting running away from it. In a world where Japanese isn't spoken, a man, a girl, and here discussing something at a table. He says that in the place where he paints his life by fighting monsters, the light of the blue moon falls from the sky directly onto his heart. The woman says that maybe it really is a dream, and if you think about it, everything falls into place. Okuda Kaigo says that this is how this world is, and says that the dog is warm. He reports that finally all these contradictions disappear. Okuda Keigo says he can now open up to others. He says he doesn't know if this is right, and that there's no need to rush, but rather to enjoy what he has. Then he says that all he wants to do now is move on with his life. Okuda Kaigo reports that it is interesting with what contradictions. He announces that he will meet tomorrow and can't help but smile. Okuda Keigo says he used to be a controversial person, but suggests leaving the cleaning for tomorrow and just relaxing today. The man says he's serious. He says that you need to bring joy to others, but at the same time, he says that the guys are too noisy. The man explains that now he likes it even more. Okuda Keigo says a gust of wind. He reports that it's been a day since the wedding ceremony and everyone's back to their normal routine, but someone is still hungover. He explains that despite this, he's undoubtedly gotten stronger and now needs to practice shooting. He says it's the same. He reports that something is happening to the animal. Okuda Kaigo says he's the only one standing now and needs to do something, then names the snake. He explains that the snake has no weaknesses and begins scanning. Okuda Kaigo reports that the arrow pierced him and there's no time to hide, but the curse didn't work. He reports that his level has increased and his scan skill has improved to level 2. He explains that the monster is a snake that has no immunity to toxins and its poison was turned against him by the windgust skill. Higo is surprised and says that his scan skill has improved so much in just a few minutes. Okuda Keigo says that if he can parry the poison breath, he could use some help. The sound of the poison breath erupting sounds like r. He says it's too early. He can't yet predict when the enemy will use the ability. Growls are heard from the creature. Okuda Kaigo makes sounds while trying to hold something with his hand. The man makes a loud noise. He says it's time, and at the same time shouts a gust of wind, creating a powerful whirlwind with his hands towards the dragon. Okuda Kaigo says he's coagulating and calls it a disease. The man says He says that some of the scales fell off, and at the same time he reports that but. Okuda Keigo says the lunge. He screams while attacking an enemy, then announces his level increase from 14 to 15 and rejoices over it. Okuda Kaigo says yes, asks if he's okay, and calls the blue wolf. He says he's glad they're okay and thanks them for always helping him out. Okuda Keigo says, ach. The man in armor asks if he was the one who killed the snake. The others are silent. He reports that the expected reaction shocked him. He brings soup. The man explains that they gave the body to the city butcher, and the boy thanks him, to which the man replies that he's welcome. The girl calls Yuno. Okuda Kaigo says the guy has had too much to drink. The girl is angry because he left her alone. The guy tells her to stand still. The man asks if they can finally make up. He says he wants to turn this into something. A man and a girl stand next to each other. Okuda Kaigo asks to pass, addressing a group of men, and then the man states that despite this, the man says this isn't the first snake in their area and asks if the dungeon is overflowing again. He says he doesn't think one request for a cleanup will be enough. Okuda Keigo says that today he was just lucky, and if he was unarmed. He reports that he is plagued by anxiety and needs to think about further improving his skills and magic. A boy asks Han-sensei and Kai-sensei to teach him. Okuda Keigo explains wind magic. He explains that to improve it, more training and experience are needed. Okuda Kaigo says the next step is unarmed parrying, adding that it's martial arts. The man says he'll be able to use higher magic, like tornado, if he masters the basics. He says it would be nice to learn a couple of moves and makes a move. The man shouts, "Me!" Okuda Keigo delivers a punch that sends two opponents flying backwards. The man asks Keigo to wait and says he can't do that. He says he has no choice. He says he wouldn't want to die learning a new skill and explains that others don't understand how he lived to his age. Okuda Kaigo says he did it and gains a new skill, a moonsault, to which the man next to him reports that he got it on his first try. Okuda Kaigo performs a moonsault and screams. He then explains that this is such a unique world, he never thought he'd learn so much here. The old man explains that now the basics of other elemental magic are in order. Wind is good at dealing with snakes, but other skills will also be useful. He explains that there are only 6 elements: fire, water, wind, earth, light, and darkness. The old man didn't think he'd say the word light. Okuda Kaigo announces he's gained a new skill, a moonsault, and says magic is so useful at night. The man with the mustache and the man with the scarf clap approvingly and say, "Excellent." A woman with a staff stands nearby. The man thanks him. A boy approaches Okuda Kaigo, asking how far he can advance in light magic, and he confirms this with the word yes. The man says snake meat is the most delicious, and Okuda Kaigo asks if it really is. Okuda Kaigo thanks him, and the man says the carcass has already been butchered. When you know where it came from, you don't really want to eat it, he says sell it. Okuda Kaigo says he's taken the scales, fangs, and venom glands, and the man says goodbye and says see you later. Okuda Kaigo thanks him for his help and also says see you later. Okuda Kaigo remarks that he didn't know snake meat was such a delicacy and is surprised that it costs $800. He says that there is a high demand for scale armor now, and the man says that he will sell it to Margot. Okuda Kaigo speaks to Margot. A masked man and 2 other men enter the building. He says it's impossible and states that he can't look at it. The man explains that this isn't what he wanted. Okuda Kaigo says he doesn't mind having a girl by his side. A loud bang is heard. Okuda Kaigo says it's time to go and that it's unnecessary for them to stay here. The girl calls out to Kaigo. The girl says it's snake scales. The man buys it, and the other man explains that they're husband and wife and arguing about it. He says it's a wedding gift. Okuda Kaigo says he'll give the scales away for free and says he's leaving. The girl asks him to wait and offers to take something. The man explains that they're on their honeymoon, after all, and the girl says it would be impolite to interrupt their vacation and thanks Kaigo. The girl explains that this is the wonderful liqueur they had at the wedding. He says he already told her it was a gift and notices it. He says he'll accept it with honor, but it would be impolite to refuse. The man says goodbye and thanks her, and the girl says goodbye. It's night, the moon is shining. Okuda Kaigo says he breathes a sigh of relief. He says the liqueur is excellent, but he's so sleepy. He says he's had a busy day, but he doesn't understand why he's so tired. The man makes a woof sound. Okuda Kaigo says his kitten is good, and the kitten makes a woof sound and says, oof. The man explains that this is the line of seduction when men clasp hands. He sits at a table across from the tattooed man and announces that he is ready. Okuda Kaigo reports that the Ashwolf's fang made a nice necklace and hopes it will protect him. He asks what will happen to him next. Okuda Kaigo then explains that he's finally mastered enchantment, but it's mostly Margot's work. He says, watch. The man replies, The man says, Juno scared him and asks what he's doing. Okuda Kaigo explains what it means to drink and tries to understand the meaning of the word girl. He repeats the word girl several times. He talks about drinking and girls, and the man asks if he's invited to the tavern. The guy says he's going home and will be back at night, and Okuda Kaigo says, okay. As he leaves, the guy asks what all this means and says it's not like him at all. He says they won't discuss business over a drink and asks if something is bothering him again. He also says that he himself liked to have a drink when he was really stressed out at work. Okuda Kaigo says it's already dark and it looks like he won't be able to take his dog with him. The dog makes a woof sound. He reports the delivery of the dagger, and the man thanks him. The man tells him that Mardo has arrived, and he says that it seems he was right. The man says he'll be back soon, and the boy says, okay. The man says it's too early to close the shop so they can come in, and the boy says, okay. The boy explains he doesn't want to leave the animal alone and will leave it with Sarasa. The top right panel shows Sarasa's shop, mithril scale. In the top left panel, Okuda Kaigo says that Sarasa. The girl says she can't believe it's true. The woman says she doesn't look very happy, and the man asks if he's come at a bad time. The woman hugs the puppy and says he's the cutest fluffy thing and a smart one. Her mood instantly changes, and the man says, puppy. Okuda Kaigo says he wants to spend time with friends and asks to look after someone, then says he should have said they were going to the tavern. The girl holds a kitten, and the man leans toward her. He says they'll have a blast with Margot and Juno, turns to the girls and tells them about the drinks. Okuda Kaigo says that they will just have a drink since they don't need any misunderstandings, and therefore it is better to warn his wife. The woman says it's creepy. Okuda Kaigo explains that the smile has disappeared from her eyes and asks if he said something wrong. He then says that here's compensation, making a yap yap sound. He thanks you for waiting. The man makes a sound of displeasure. He says that he needs to be taken care of. The man with tattoos asks Kaigo to come with him. Kaigo agrees. The man in the black t-shirt says that they have already started. Okuda Kaigo says he wants to try something unusual and hopes to have a quiet drink at the tavern. The guy says welcome to the Butterfly Cradle Tavern. The guy says it's all very simple. The girl tells them to wait, and another girl asks if they're sure they came here to eat. The woman says she's been to places like this before in her world. The man with tattoos explains something in his own language. The guy in the checkered shirt says that's tactful, and Okuda Kigo says he didn't think they'd come here. The guy tells them to get settled. The man says that since he's here, there's no point in standing around. The text says there's one for each of them. Okuda Kaigo says he wishes him luck. The girl asks what's wrong. The man gives her a thumbs up and says good luck. The girl tells him to sit down. Okuda Kaigo announces that he has been given a quiet beauty. He says it's nice to meet you and wishes you a good day. The girl says, good evening. The guy says it's already dark and asks if he's nervous. The girl says, nice lady, and confirms. The guy says he wants to know her name. The girl asks if they can communicate through letters. Okuda Kaigo says he's writing a letter. He tells Yurina that her name is Yurina and offers her some food. Yurina thanks him. Okuda Kaigo says he feels like an accountant from the academy and calls himself Kaigo. He explains that to communicate with foreigners during business trips, he absorbed words like crazy. The woman says his name is Keigo, but things are a bit more complicated here, and perhaps Margot and Juno brought him here so he could learn the local language better. He says that, of course, he doesn't want that and asks how they are doing. The woman says, uh-huh. The man with a tattoo explains what he likes. Okuda Kaigo looks at them. The tattooed man says he'll tear Sarasa to pieces if he finds out, and the girl laughs. He says it's his business and suggests they return to the conversation with Yurina. Okuda Keigo says music. The girl says they have something to discuss and confirms it with the word definitely. The woman says it's a bard, and he asks what he's singing about. Okuda Keigo says it's a grade. The girl writes something in her notebook, making writing sounds. Okuda Keigo asks what it is. He explains that, in short, on a distant mountain in the west, a great tree has been growing for 10,000 years, and in its roots is hidden a flower, shining golden brighter than the sun, Uriyun. He says that this is what the song is about. The great tree is said to be protected by divine beasts, and legend has it that the flower's nectar can cure any disease. They say that to prepare the elixir, you need to mix the elixir, Urian nectar, Irene grass, melanin, a medicinal plant, and add the hair of a divine beast. Okuda Kaigo says it's very interesting and thanks Yurina. Yurina says that girls in bars are the best foreign language teachers and notes that her friend apparently wasn't lying. He says it was fun. The man asks Keigo if it was fun, and Keigo replies that it was fun. The man invites him to come again, and Keigo agrees, saying he'd like to come back and have lunch with Yurina again. Okuda Kaigo reveals that Mardo and Juno were worried about him not interacting with women much, and explains that he knew that was exactly what they wanted. He says that he would never have come here alone, and that his acquaintance with Yurina is their merit. Okuda Kaigo says the animal is cute and asks where it came from. The animal makes a sound. Okuda Kaigo and the other guy react to it. He says he can't believe this happened and explains he didn't mean to hurt anyone. The girl says they now have to decide what to do next, and the other girl says the situation requires a cautious approach. Okuda Kaigo says, oh, then suggests they go home to bed, before yelling, ow. He apologizes to the boys and admits it was his fault. The woman says that if they are not careful, they could get into trouble, and the man says the sound of a blow. Okuda Kigo says he couldn't figure out anything except questions, and that even though he didn't do anything wrong, he still feels guilty. The man explains he has the right to remain silent. On the floor, the man screams in pain. The woman explains that this isn't just a workout, but a real battle, and explains that she needs to focus on every move. The man says he's ready and isn't going to give up despite the pain. The woman says she seems to have calmed down, and the other woman says, Okuda Keigo watches them. He asks what the man is doing when he sniffs something near the dog. The man says there's something in Margot's pocket, and at that moment, the dog bites his hand, causing everyone to be surprised. The girl asks what it is, pointing to the object in her hand. The woman covers her mouth with her hand. The guy announces that this is the end. The man and the guy stare ahead in silence. Top right, Okuda Kaigo thinks he's definitely going to die here and calls out Ashley. Bottom right, several people are sitting on the floor, making sounds like scraping and banging, and one of them says, bam. Top left, a girl tells Okuda Kaigo he can go. The woman laughs. The man kneels by the fire, silent, and the woman, holding a cat, says that if that's the case, the man says goodbye. The The man apologizes and begs for forgiveness when they shake his hand. Okuda Kigo reports that he ran home and that there was no need to linger on the battlefield. Light. Okuda Kaigo explains why men are attracted to breasts, saying that even here and there, breasts are so attractive. He explains that the first food is mother's milk and also explains that the female breast is a symbol of peace and tranquility. It is reported that to get to her, you need to go a long way, but men will go to the ends of the earth for the sake of boobs. The girl explains that the difference between men's and women's attitudes toward breasts is simply intergalactic in scale, and just like in the parable of Orome and Hikaboshi, men and women view breasts differently. Okuda Keigo says it precisely. He talks about great ancestors and explains that he couldn't forget about the constellations, then names the constellation Boobs. He hopes his friends are okay, and the man next to him says that's nonsense. Okuda Kaigo says there's a breeze and it smells nice. The girl says it's nice. He says he can't get her out of his head since that day and asks what he's thinking about and also wonders what it is, love. Okuda Kaigo says that if that's the case, it'll pass soon, and explains that he never stays in a romantic mood for long. Then he says, phew, it's so late, and that her tavern is opening. After that, Okuda Kaigo says, no, there's nothing to do with her. He says that the tavern has a lot of different drinks he'd like to try, and that it's high time he brushed up on the language. He also says that he wants to drink something tasty. Okuda Kaigo says that visiting her would actually be beneficial, and confirms this. He says he's had nothing but trouble. He says that he ended up going to the tavern and even bought some souvenirs. The girl asks about the smoked egg and he confirms it. The girl tries the egg and says it's very tasty, and he says, that's good. Okuda Keigo says it's a good snack to go with drinks, and the girl asks if that's true. Okuda Keigo says he's been visiting her often since then. He says he enjoys spending time with her. The woman turns to her mother. The mother screams, Mom! He says he enjoys spending time with her, but the woman and he exchange something in their hands and he says, oh. Okuda Kaigo explains that the more he enjoyed the time he spent with her, he asks her to look at his hand. The girl says she sees. He says he didn't use magic and explains that there are moments when he returns to reality. He says he's not bragging, but he was popular with women at work, but he builds walls around his heart. He says he hurt people who became close to him, and he notices. Okuda Keigo says he wonders if Yurina knows how he feels and tells him, am. Yurina offers to eat together, giving herself entirely to just chatting, drinking, and making him happy, and he would never leave her. He asks why the moon is blue, and the girl asks because it's always been that way. He tells her that she can actually hear what he's saying and notes that he's interested in this city and the world. The woman says she's always been curious about what he says. Okuda Kaigo explains that it might just be a seduction technique, but he sees that she genuinely enjoys spending time with him. He says he likes the color of the night sky, and the girl replies that she likes it too. He says he only has eyes for her, and the girl says she shines like a star. Okuda Kaigo wants to get to know the girl better and learn her secrets, and he says he'll reveal his secret too. The girl says she wants to know more about her and asks to watch. She explains that she never thought the time spent with her would be so fulfilling. Okuda Kaigo speaks well. He says thank you for looking after Ash. The man says the guy has become more fluent now, and the guy thanks the man. The girl says she's glad everything's going well between them, and the guy agrees. The man says that Juno and he can't go to that tavern anymore, but Okuda Kigo says the night wind is definitely cold and agrees. He says he needs to prepare himself for the bitter cold, and the man offers to light a fire, which he agrees to. The man explains that it's late autumn now, and the winter will be so cold you'll be able to see diamond dust in the air. He thanks him and says goodbye. Okuda Kaigo announces that he has decided what the gift will be and gets to work. He says he'll transfer what he saw today here and explains that the evaluation effect is as follows. He's sure Yurina will be delighted, as she's a curious person. Then he explains that he might also add recipes and says it's not so important to notice. This. Okuda Kigo announces that it's ready and says that if the girl thinks he has no taste because he's giving her a book he made himself, well, we'll see. The man says the gift is addressed to Yurina and is from Kigo. He says, see you later, bye, and the man says goodbye. Okuda Keigo says that he doesn't have to worry about winter now because it's warm, and that he should thank Margot, but he says he needs a chair for Yurina and that he can come early. Then he says the time has come. A man says, oh, and another man says, what a coincidence. Okuda Kaigo and the girl simultaneously say that it is a book. He says that these are winter clothes worn in this country and tells Yurina that it's still a whole outfit. He explains that he should change into it right now. He says that he looks good and is grateful that he doesn't have to worry about the cold anymore and mentally notes that. The woman says, "It's absolutely wonderful," and says it seems worth it. Okuda Keigo asks if he can take a look at the book, and the woman says, sure, she'll take a look at hers too. He smiles and looks at the girl, who is amazed by the book's contents and is reading it avidly. The girl says she'll read her book too, and he confirms this. Okuda Kigo informs him that Yurina apparently gave him a grimoire containing survival basics and ice magic. Yurina explains how to recite the spell out loud and asks him to concentrate, staying very close to Okuda Kigo. He says that first comes the assessment, and then the ice. He reports that it is ice and exclaims in surprise. Okuda Kaigo reports that the skill has been acquired and gains the freeze skill. Then he explains that he realized he can acquire skills from books. He says that this is how ice is made in the shape of stones, and confirms this with the word yes. He explains that, as with other spells, the amount of energy and time spent on it produces different results. He announces that now you can make ice without a book. The girl thanks him, and the girl suggests reading together, thinking Yurina likes books. Okuda Keigo says yes, Yurina, and says he's happy to hear it. He says it feels like he spent so little time with her. When he's with Yurina, time flies by, as easily as a calm river. He says thank you for looking after her today. The girl confirms that she gave him the outfit. The man asks, and the girl says it suits him. The man and girl say goodbye. The man says goodbye, and he says goodbye and leaves, noting that they are the best married couple and how warm. Okuda Kigo says he can't sleep, and muses that the reason for his reluctance to get close to people may be because his boss says that being late is as sinful as murder. He explains that, if you think about it, he hasn't always treated other people with care, which means he's taken their lives. He says that because being late means you're taking someone else's time, which means you're also taking their life. The man says that in this world, he doesn't feel anything when he interacts with Juno, Margot, Sarasa, and Elsa. He explains that they may have been slowing him down, but a guy raises a mug, a girl with a braid says that this is probably what friendship is. A woman with long hair holds a furry animal, and a man with an eye patch raises his hand and also holds a mug. Okuda Kaigo then informs and asks, what about Yurina? The girl says she doesn't like alcohol, but she's willing to make an exception for him. He explains that in that case, she should try sake, as it's smoother and tastier. The guy says it's understandable, and the dog says it's not, taking the lives of others. Okuda Kaigo says that maybe she is his destiny, and he should share his with them. He says it's fate? What's wrong with me? He just said something so romantic. He says the more he thinks about her, the more he feels like he's sinking into a deep labyrinth. Okuda Kaigo says that if he is asked whether he likes her or dislikes her, he will answer that he likes her, and at the same time he does not understand why love is so complicated. He reports that, while thinking, he found himself in the city and admits that he does not understand himself. The man says he's come to buy some winter clothes before the cold weather hits its worst, and while he's here, he'll give Yurina another gift, which is why he's here. The man greets her and wishes her welcome. Okuda Kaigo explains that it's a water dagger and confirms it. The girl asks if he's sure, and he replies that of course. He says he'll take care of it and confirms this. The man says there are security issues here, and next time they should bring a weapon, and the woman objects that he can't see that she's talking to Yurina. Okuda Kaigo says he can't ask her that, but he wonders if other customers give her anything. The guy says he's feeling down. The man clutches the glass tightly. Okuda Kaigo says he still feels weak and will train more. He then yells, "Aura," as he hits the target. The guy asks if it's a monster and says that if it's behind the wall, he can aim from above. The man asks what's there, and the sounds of an animal scratching are heard nearby. Okuda Kaigo explains that this is a monster bear, different from the usual ones. He then explains that they need to calm down and assesses the situation. The red-furred grizzly explains that it is a rare species of grizzly. He says that it is autumnal and red, and asks if it is a monster of autumn color. Okuda Kaigo says that if they are fire elemental, water should work well against them, and explains that he's loading a crossbow with arrows. He says he's aiming. The bear lets out a loud cry. The man yells, "Fire," and shoots the bear. The bear falls to the ground. He asks if he killed it. Okuda Keigo says nothing will survive and asks what happened. The man reports that the enemy has closed in. Okuda Keigo fires his crossbow into the beast's face, causing the beast to fall, and Okuda Keigo continues firing. He reports that his level has increased from 15 to 16, and his stats have increased: HP from 34 to 36, MP from 24 to 26, MCT from 28 to 30, SDR from 38 to 40, INT from 80 to 82, SER from 38 to 40. Okuda Kaigo says it's delicious and that it's the first time he's eaten such fresh bear meat. He explains that their meat is softer than that of terrestrial bears, and yet he eats. He explains that he made a potion with another egg and says that the testicles of the red-furred grizzly bear are highly nutritious and can be used medicinally. He then says that he can't seem to resist trying it. Okuda Kaigo says he feels his body lighten and asks her to appreciate it. He explains he's going to drink something and makes a sound as he drinks. He says the item is Aegir's healing potion, with high healing and restoration powers. He asks if it restores body parts. Okuda Keigo says he has a powerful restorative potion, but he's reluctant to drink it now that he knows what it's made from. He explains that there's some fur left over and suggests they try making a quilt out of it. He says they're going to town, Ash, and the dog barks. Okuda Keigo asks her to take care of it and hands over a small bottle. The girl tells her to rely on it for now. Okuda Keigo says there's something else he came here for and explains that this should do the trick. The girl responds, okay. He says it's a residence. He explains that the residence in the city center is amazing and starts to get nervous. Okuda Keigo reports that this is Mr. Byron's residence. He says he's a little nervous. He says he's come to see Mr. Bayer. The man says it's the changing of the guard, and another man sees Kigo out and asks him to wait a minute. The armored man addresses Kigo by name, and Kigo replies that it's Tony. Okuda Keigo says this must be his office. The man tells Keigo to look out the window. Okuda Keigo explains that he seems to have a lot of free time, like a retired lord, and notices that there he is. The man says he'll meet Keigo right after their walk. Keigo responds well, and the man says body part healing potion, also known as the Ajiru potion, and asks if it will have any effect. The man and Okuda Keigo simultaneously say what is going on. The man says it's a valuable potion, but if he hides it, he'll be plagued by nightmares. He says it's amazing such a potion exists and asks to drink it. The man explains that he needs to drink the potion, and he says it's important. The boy tells him that if he can't drink it, he'll die. The man explains that it's not just a drink, but a medicine that will help him survive. Okuda Keigo looks at the man and the boy. A young man with short blonde hair and a patterned hat calls himself a king and says he shines like the sun and that his light is blinding. A man with a mustache and a hat with crosses on the brim looks at him with admiration and tears of joy. The man reports that his arm has recovered, and he was right. The man shouts that it's his arm. Okuda Keigo explains that the man's arm has indeed recovered. The man says that with this potion he will no longer be so helpless, and the other man says that it is better not to tell him what is in this potion. He claps his hands. Okuda Keigo announces that he's finished his business here and will be heading home, and the woman yells, "Wait!" The man with the mustache snaps his fingers, and the other man says something unintelligible. He says it's hard and explains that rudely refusing a gift is not an option, so he should accept it happily. He explains that to survive in his world, you need to have at least a little money, and after all, there aren't even marketplaces like Ozon here. He explains that others don't even care. Okuda Keigo says it's almost winter, and he's feeling the cold, and also suggests there are many more monsters he'll encounter. He says he's suddenly feeling a little down. Then Okuda Keigo says he'd rather look forward to the snowfall and snowball fights with E. He says there is no Christmas here, and then explains that even if there is, Christmas is usually spent with family. Okuda Keigo says he wonders if his quilt is ready yet. He says to keep the change. The girl replies, "Huh?" The man says, "No." The man thanks her. The man with the eye patch explains that they are merchants, and Okuda Keigo doesn't need to worry about money, and Okuda Keigo explains that counting change is a headache. Okuda Keigo thanks her. The woman confirms that explaining everything is also a headache, and the man replies, yes. Against the backdrop of a house with a smoking chimney, he says it's warm. He says it's so nice and that it seems he can survive the winter wrapped in just this blanket. Okuda Keigo says that since there are two of them, he'll put the second blanket on top and asks where Ash is. He then says that Ash is so adorable. The man asks, "Keigo, are you home?" And Okuda Keigo replies, yes. Juno and Elsa are reported to have arrived, noting that this is the first time they've come to visit alone. He suggests a drink, and the girl says she still has bear meat. The guy says it's very tasty, the girl says it's delicious. Okuda Keigo says he has some rumino juice. The girl thanks him. The man explains that it must be hard not to drink when you run a tavern, and if he remembers correctly, she doesn't drink. A guy and a girl are arguing over who should say something, and the guy asks the other guy to stop. He turns his attention to the girl and asks what's wrong, and the girl calls him. A guy asks if Okuda Keigo is dating Yurina, and the girl next to him expresses concern. Okuda Keigo says the guys came just to ask and explains that it's complicated, so he's just dodging the question. The guy says he'll help her get ready for winter after dinner. The girl says that's great. He understands that. The girl says that's understandable. The text says they didn't ask anything else. The woman says goodbye, and the man says they'll see each other. Okuda Kaigo says he didn't go there last night, but he's okay anyway, and says it won't be long. Then Okuda Kaigo says, now. The guy explains that he won't be able to collect water when it snows, but he will be able to melt the ice that will collect here, and says that 3 containers should be enough. Okuda Kaigo says that with the water dagger, they can fill the baths much faster, and that they have water in reserve, so they can fill another bath today. In the next scene, a sound is heard and whew is said. He says, whew. He explains that romance in movies and real life are very different, and explains that you need to make an effort to live each day. Okuda Kaigo reports that installing the bathtub and thinking about everything that's going on took all day, then laughs and says everything's fine. The man says it's just another cold day and thinks it's obvious. He says there are a lot of little squirrels among them and asks if they're lost. He notices a sound and says, turning his attention to the squirrels. Okuda Kaigo explains that he should have the freedom to choose how he wants to live, and wonders if that means sacrificing himself for others. He explains that because he still has to get married, his boss constantly told him to compromise. He says it's ready and quite good. He explains that, unlike romance, survival is much more important, and romance is a complicated thing, and monsters exist all over the world. Okuda Kaigo says the clothes rack is ready, and suggests they move on. He says that if the dragon attacks again, even defending himself seems impossible, and wonders if he'll be able to protect Irina. He says that here is the dagger, and the man thanks him. He says that there must be someone more capable for her than him. Okuda Kaigo is silent. A man with tattoos on his arm asks if Ash needs babysitting. He says he won't go there. The man says it's clear. The man says they'll see each other, and Okuda Kaigo says goodbye. He says that for some reason he is so lost. Okuda Kaigo says that doing nothing makes him feel so ordinary, but he says that he wants to break all ties with people again. The cat makes a sound. Okuda Kaigo says that if you think about it, in the era where there is no internet or social media, people are left only to communicate with each other. He explains that the only entertainment he had there was bathing, eating, fishing, and writing, and that as his. He says he's used to the way they communicated before. He explains that they could exchange just a few words and end the conversation, but they can protect their hearts from intrusion. An enemy communicates that they can reject, cancel, or report, while an ally communicates that they can block or attack. Okuda Kaigo explains that when it comes to romance, the heart becomes heavy, and in fact, most heartaches are caused by love. He explains that people prefer to choose the path without pain. He says that in the end, everything comes from our ancestors, and when the heart works beyond its capabilities. Okuda Kaigo says he won't be able to feel love. The man starts saying, you. He reports that the declining birth rate is also preventing people from getting married. Okuda Kaigo says he's been thinking about Irina a lot, and thinks his heart is at its limit too. He reports that his mind is starting to fight back. He says that it is better to forget, and explains that although he loves her, his mind refuses, and he again contradicts himself. Okuda Kaigo says this behavior should be natural, and says it will be better this way. The man makes a sound of surprise. He says he should feel better, yes, and at the same time he hits the surface with his fist, making impact sounds, while making sounds like coo and Okuda Kaigo says and reports that after he dug into himself, he says he realized there is no one on the planet more unhappy than him. He makes sounds of pain. The guy announces that he's had a drink. Okuda Kaigo explains that they'll be drinking together tonight. The man laughs. The girl and another girl look at the man drinking from a mug. The man reports that Yurina Oka is in trouble, and the girl screams that Yurina Oka is in danger. Henrik announces that he is the lord of the town of Leicester. He explains that something strange has recently happened here. The right arm his father lost in a fight with a dragon has been restored. The man says that no matter how he asked them, they wouldn't say anything, but he has a feeling. The man explains that if they're so stubborn, it must be Kaigo Okuda's doing. The man says he bribed the treasurer and praises him for his good work. The man laughs and says it looks like he rewarded Kaigo for his treatment. The man says that then this is a potion for healing body parts. They say that the father's hand has been restored, and they ask if this means that the heart has also been restored. They answer that it doesn't matter. The man reports that he has never heard of a potion that can restore lost body parts. The man says that if he sells it to other nobles, he will undoubtedly be swimming in gold. The man says that he will receive those delicious dishes and daggers, as well as anything else he wants. Okuda Kaigo explains that if he makes him his potion maker, he'll turn him into a slave. He's certain his father will try to stop him, so he'll start by attacking his weak spot. The man on the left says he went into the red light district, and the man on the right confirms it. The man in the center explains that he did. The man on the right says that it's clear. The man says that then everything is simple and he should use his greed, and the guy says that he knows. The man laughs and says that he can team up with women and blackmail him. First the local thugs, then the women. While he's having fun, Okuda Keigo says he's setting the thugs on him to intimidate him for touching their women. The man says that after this, he will lock him in his basement and he will brew potions for him for the rest of his life. The guy laughs and says, "He he he," then says that this way his father won't be able to stop him and he will get it. The man says that the plan is perfect, if you can say so, and asks the god Zeraria if he thinks the same, while he laughs. A man with glasses rings a bell. A man with long blonde hair asks Jira if he was invited. The man says he has something he'll do for the other man and will tell him his plan, after which he'll head to the red light district. The other man says he understands. The man tells you to deliver this to him. The text says it's a new thug named Kaigo. Okuda Kaigo says he looks like a dead man. He sits silently with a fishing rod by the water. The text says this happens as usual, and each time he falls into loneliness, unsure of what to do. He says that he is unconventional in all respects and in this world. Okuda Kaigo thinks it'll be a welcome change of scenery and doesn't even remember how he got to the river and back. He simply explains that it's sad, but in any case, as long as he's alive, he needs to eat and gives a rating. In the right panel, a man reports that the flesh tastes like cod and explains that it's a fish from the kingdom of Lancaster, which has an abundance of caviar. In the left panel, a man explains that if the caviar were marinated in salt and chilled with ice cream, he could make a snack out of the caviar. Okuda Kaigo says he has some chili peppers in his shed and explains that pickling them together can create a new flavor. The dog barks. The girl asks for help. Okuda Kaigo says he doesn't understand and asks if they are girls. He tells her what happened and asks what happened. The girl asks to wait. Okuda Kaigo says he doesn't want any trouble and hears a dog barking. He explains that, judging by Ash's reaction, they're probably being chased by monsters. The girl thanks him and asks if the other one is hurt, and the woman advises them to go inside. The woman says she's unsure and says, He asks her to wait here and tells her to follow him, simultaneously picking up the cat. The man asks what happened. The woman says, "Thank you very much for the help." The girl replies, "Yes." Okuda Keigo says he doesn't think the girls should be too relaxed in a stranger's house and says they might get cold, so they should put on clothes. The girl says, Okuda Keigo explains he doesn't know what's going on, but these girls look like they're from the red light district, and remarks that. He says he'll look outside and asks if there are any signs of monsters. The man replies no. Ash remains silent. The boy makes a woof sound, and the man reacts with surprise. Okuda Kaigo says, a girl with 2 ponytails invites him to sleep with them. He explains that this bed is for guests. The woman invites him to sleep with them. He notices that they are tired from running and calls himself a shakehead, and the girl says, no. Okuda Kaigo says they probably have their reasons, and he doesn't blame them. He notices that the 3 girls are alone in the city and asks what's going on. He says that everything is clean and explains that it is night now, and he will ask them to clean it up in the morning. Okuda Keigo drinks and says, then says, yeah. Then he explains that he knew he didn't look so good and says he's going to take a rest, mentioning the real refrigerator and all that. He says he doesn't understand what's happening, reacting to the sound of the stomp. He then quietly makes a sound, trying to wake up. A girl laughs and says, hee, another girl explains something, and a third girl holds a lantern. A man shouts, "What is this?" The animal asks to wait a minute, and the man tells him to stop. The animal says, "Stop," and the man shouts, "No." Okuda Keigo bangs on the door. The man in the chair asks what to do now, and the girl and the woman with the dog say, no. The man says in surprise. The monster says that these are his girls. He says that this is some kind of nonsense, explains that he finally understands the situation, and asks if they are from the beauty salon. A character in Spider-Man shouts, demanding to know where the potion is, and explains that it's a partial action potion. Okuda Kaigo replies, "Ki," and ponders what if he's referring to the potion that healed that nobleman's right arm. He says it's a sword of hellfire and suggests trying to stand with it. The man screams that it hurts and is surprised. The girls move their hands away and close their eyes. The boy screams in pain as he falls off the porch. The man says that this mohawk-faced bastard must have been sent by Henry. Okuda Keigo announces that Afro will be the new owner. He says so, then remains silent while the women next to him explain that it's a beauty salon. He says he doesn't know what to do, and explains that he can't quite imagine the right time to send the girls out into the cold. Okuda Kaigo says it's Margot. The man starts talking, The woman says she can't stay here any longer and asks Okuda Kaigo not to try to stop her. He says he doesn't want to let her go and asks her to stay. The woman explains she has to go and bids him farewell. A woman makes a sound from afar. A man with dark hair and neat bangs, Okuda Keigo, remains silent, and a man with a spiky hairstyle expresses surprise. He speaks clearly and says he didn't even think they were drugged. Irina says she spoke with the beauty salon staff. Okuda Kaigo reveals that the former Mohawk was a bandit from the red light district and ordered 3 beauties from the district to attack and kidnap him. Irina learned of this plan not through her connections in the entertainment district, but told Margot and the others, after which they rushed to the scene. The woman says they'll sleep in the blacksmith's hut, and the man agrees. The man tells Kigo that Irina is very worried about him, and Kigo agrees. Okuda Kaigo announces that they've decided to throw a party and explains that he tried to invite the 3 kidnappers, but they were too embarrassed and declined. The man says it's late, so they'll have to settle for this, then notes that the taste is acceptable. He thanks for waiting and announces that there is a new dish on the menu, cheese and cod roe. The girl says it's delicious. The guy asks if it's an egg. The man says, and the woman says, chi-ee-ee. Okuda Kaigo is silent. The man says it's great to eat together. He tells Yurina that he wants to talk to her outside. Yurina agrees. Okuda Keigo reports that, for some reason, he stopped showing up at her store and didn't say anything. The woman says, "Ha," she says, she rushed after him in such thin clothes. A man and a woman stand by the fire. The man explains something. The woman covers her mouth with her hands. Okuda Keigo tells her he owes her an apology and hopes she doesn't catch a cold. The girl agrees. Then Okuda Keigo makes a sound, and the girl looks at him. The woman and he are talking about snow. The woman reports that she now looks like an angel with perfectly white wings. Okuda Kaigo says that he is. The girl laughs. He says it's stupid. He says he needs to tell Yurina how he feels, and he needs to do it now, before she disappears with the light snow. Yurina asks what's wrong. He apologizes for not coming into her store. Yurina remains silent, and Okuda Kaigo says he can't stop thinking about the other person, and then he starts talking. A woman says she loves Okuda Keigo. He replies that he loves her too and loves her very much. The woman starts to speak, but stops. The woman says the snow is so beautiful that she wants to stay here forever. Okuda Kaigo replies that he thinks so too, and that this place is truly special. The woman says she's glad he's here with her. Okuda Kaigo explains that he too is very happy to be with her. The girl speaks to Keigo. Keigo touches the girl's ear and makes a sound. Okuda Kaigo asks what it is, and he says that he seems to have started crying without even realizing it. The woman smiles and closes her eyes. The man says that the desire that had so powerfully taken hold of his heart seemed to him to disappear along with the melting snow. He explains that if she is in trouble, he will be the first to come to her aid, and says that he wants to be there for her. Okuda Kaigo says he's ready to be her shield and sword on this fantastic night where angel wings dance in the air. He says he thinks it's time to go back. The girl covers her mouth with her hand. The man hugs the girl. Okuda Kaigo says, "Ah!" The girl reacts with fear, and the dog barks. He says he can't believe this happened and asks what happened. The girl next to him says she doesn't understand what's going on. Okuda Kaigo says to knock on the stove. The girl explains that if you knock on the stove, it will open. The man with tattoos says he'll try it now. The girl with braids says it really works. The guy says, "Guys," he says, "good evening," and explains how you're doing here. The man announces that he won't leave the door open anymore. The girl and another girl congratulate him, and the man with the eye patch raises his fist. Okuda Keigo says, "Well, well." The girl looks at him and smiles. He reports that after this they had a fun chat with the guys about his love with Yurina, and everyone got drunk. The girl says she never dreamed they'd have such a fun and happy night. The man explains he never thought things would turn out this way. Yurina says goodnight to Keigo, and Okuda Keigo says goodnight to her. He reports that it was getting late in the morning anyway, and he had to cook rice soup for everyone. He explains that, with the exception of Yurina, who quickly sobered up, he had such a hangover that he had to stay in bed for 2 days. Okuda Keigo walks silently across the room with a pillow in his hands, followed by a cat. He then sets the pillow down and notices something, then declares he's an idiot. The guy says they're leaving, and he explains that they each have their own work. He says, "See you later, Keigo," and the guy asks her to wait. He puts down a blanket and says it will be warm now, and the girl confirms that it is. The woman says thank you and says she's learned a few words in the local language and that Yurina has learned a few words in Japanese. Okuda Keigo says he's a little happy. He says, "See you later." The girl says, "See you later." The guy says, "Bye." Okuda Keigo tells him everything is fine and it's time to go home, then sneezes and starts shaking. Just a few hours after everyone left, the man speaks in response to the dog's barking. He says he wants to see Yurina and doesn't want to be alone. Okuda Kaigo says he's so lonely and calls out to him to come along, and the cat replies, "Woof." He says that he is sure that she is used to dealing with drunk men and asks if Yurina still works at that establishment. The guy says, "Damn," and says, "Teach." The man and girl look at Okuda Kaigo. He tells her that she is free to do whatever she wants, that interfering would mean restricting her freedom, and he knows that's not a good idea. The dog makes a sound. The guy says he's losing control of his feelings, and the man says he's now. Okuda Kaigo says he knows he shouldn't be so impulsive, but he can't help himself. He says it's already midnight. A creaking sound can be heard in the background. Okuda Kaigo informs that Margot and the others are sleeping and he doesn't want to wake them up, so he won't call them. The guy says he's already feeling ashamed. The man is silent, standing next to the dog. Okuda Kaigo says that he is already standing here and has come this far, and then says that he will think about it later and explains that he was so worried that he did not pay attention to this fact. He says that if there was ever a moment in his life when he needed to act, then perhaps now is the moment, and he says welcome. Okuda Kaigo calls out to Yuri, then calls out to Yurina, and Yurina answers him. Okuda Kaigo says he knew it. A woman explains something to a group of people at a table. He tells the girl not to be afraid and laughs. The girl replies that she thanks Kaigo, and he agrees. The man with short blonde hair asks who she is, and the girl makes a woof sound. Okuda Kaigo announces that he brought Ash to the store and asks Ash to get to work. Ash makes a woof woof sound. Several girls admire Ash, saying he's so cute and exclaiming Kaya and look. He reports that they haven't had any problems with pets. The girl on the right says it's a small, furry client and calls him a cutie. The girl in the center asks if it's their pet, and the girl on the left replies briefly. The woman tells Kigo to sit next to her, explaining that she's single right now, to which Kigo agrees. The woman explains that Ash is popular wherever he goes and that he's like a mascot for the place. Okuda Kaigo thanks her for the blanket, but the girl replies that she's welcome. The woman asks if it's his dog, and the girl says mom. He and the girl clink glasses. Okuda Keigo says welcome, explaining that this cool woman is the mother of the entire enterprise. Okuda Keigo says that every time he sees her, his danger sensors go off, and he feels he shouldn't go against her. He thinks she'll break something, but is glad it's just... The guy says this girl is here, and the man confirms that she's definitely worth contacting. He says these are the kind of people you shouldn't mess with. The guy asks, what the hell? Okuda Kaigo says he is, and the man yells at him and demands he grab it. The man also scolds him. Okuda Kaigo responds by saying, "Oh, you." He says it's the guy with the mohawk, and from right to left they show three guys with the caption, mohawk, afro, and bald. Okuda Kaigo asks to stop, explains that Yurina is at work here and that it is necessary to sort this out peacefully so as not to cause even greater troubles. He says he doesn't have much on hand, as he gave most of it to the nobleman, and offers to drink a restorative potion. The man is surprised and asks if this is the potion. He explains that, frankly, he doesn't know if the potion will work for his hair. The man begins. In the top right, a man shouts for his brother, while another man warns that it's his head. Below, Okuda Kigo remarks that he's experiencing a sense of déjà vu and that his hair seems even longer than before. He says hey in response to the greeting. The man with the mohawk addresses him as he's a bro. The man with the mohawk says he needs to talk to the girl first, and he asks her to stop, expressing pain. The man with the mohawk says, hey. The girl grabs Okuda K. Okuda Kaigo says he's doing something weird. The man with the fiery head screams. The woman calls out for her brother. Okuda Kaigo says his mother is doing great. In the top right panel, he asks Yurina if she's okay, and she confirms. He says he didn't know even Mrs. Yurina would be in danger. In the middle right panel, several characters discuss how the fire will get even bigger and urge someone to bring alcohol quickly. One of them addresses. The old man says he doesn't want to do this and that mom is much scarier than these bandits. Okuda Kigo asks to let him through, as there's no time for words, and says he's taking Yurina. The woman starts to speak, but pauses, and Okuda Kigo asks what she wants. The girl says she has 300 gold coins, and he says, it's right here. Okuda Kaigo says that Yurina is more important to him than any amount of money. The man listens. He says that he will not let go of the girl's hand. The girl asks for her mother. The man hands her a bag. The mother tells her to go. The man and the girl turn to her. The girl thanks the man and hugs him, and he's surprised. The man explains that there's no need to thank him, he just did what he had to do. Okuda Keigo announces that they're running away, and the other man confirms it. Okuda Keigo says he'll distract them, and the woman thanks him and starts running with the dog. The man encourages Ash to run. The man in the hat announces that they will not pass and strikes. He shouts to stop. The three men look forward. Okuda Kaigo tells her to stop. The girl says she can't stop. He reports that mom couldn't cope alone. He and the girl see enemies. He tells them to stop and expresses dissatisfaction. Okuda Keigo says, K. The girl covers her mouth with her hand and makes a sound like a sob. The man asks where they are. The woman answers unintelligibly. The man says, ah. The woman says, he calls Yurina here. Okuda Kaigo tells him to get out of the way. The man reacts to this because of the girl, and Okuda Kaigo thinks about how to protect her. The guy says yes. The man explains that if they don't have money, they won't be able to enter the city. The girl says she has money. The man asks her to show it. The man says that's enough. Okuda Kaigo reports that it's ice. He explains that the puddle is freezing and says that's great. He says he needs to replenish his mana somehow, and he has an idea. The girl calls Q, he apologizes to his sister and shouts, wind. A woman screams, a masked man expresses surprise. A shirtless man with an afro runs alongside them. The guy says it's impossible and explains that they can't afford to lose even one fighter. The man explains that if they lose, death awaits them. Okuda Keigo screams. The man says it was loud and curses. The girl tells them not to dare lift her skirt. He explains that they are alive and asks if it's too much. The girl grabs Okuda Keigo's hand and he says, ah. In the right panel, a girl says she's asking for forgiveness. Okuda Keigo listens to her. The left panel depicts a horse against a backdrop of falling snow. He reports that as he heard, they were arrested, and now they will not threaten them. Okuda Kaigo and the girl sit silently under a blanket in the snow. A man says hello. A man makes nia nia sounds. A man in a cart moves along a snowy street. Okuda Kaigo says he can't afford to relax because there's still a lot of work ahead. The woman says she understands his fatigue and suggests he take a little rest. The woman says she can't believe he actually came and says he looks tired. He explains that he didn't expect to see her here either and that he came to help. Okuda Kaigo and a girl cuddle together on the day it snowed. Okuda Kaigo says the snow stopped falling. The text says all the howling ceased that night, as if nature was congratulating them. In the silence of the road, where only the sound of the carriage can be heard, he tells her that she wrote him a letter. He explains that if it becomes difficult for him to be with her, and if they can no longer bear each other's pain, then she can leave him. The girl says that, of course, she might cry. Okuda Kaigo reveals that Yurina knows all about his impulses and has accepted him, even preparing a unique escape route for him due to his misanthropic nature and disunity. He says he doesn't even know how someone can be so kind to him. Okuda Kaigo says that he is just an irregular factor in this world and wonders what if one day he suddenly wakes up and finds himself in Japan. If tomorrow I were suddenly separated from Yurina and Ash. Okuda Kaigo is sure that his heart would be broken, and he can't let Yurina know about it because he won't be able to live without her anymore. He says that's how his life with Yurina began. He suddenly hugs Yurina from behind, and Yurina reacts with surprise and slight confusion. Okuda Kaigo says he hopes they grow old like this. He says that when they become grandparents, he wants to tell her he loves her every day. He says he's sure they'll be fine no matter what. A woman tells Okuda Kaigo that they have guests. Okuda Kaigo says, huh? The man greets Kaigo and says it's been a while. The man says he's going to the stairs. The woman asks how long the girl has been wearing Kaigo's clothes. He says, The girl replies, yes. The man explains that Yurina left her things at Margot's. The man asks how the mother from Yurina's former place of work is doing. Okuda Kaigo says okay and assumes that's all the luggage. The girl asks Yurina why she doesn't zip it up all the way, and Yurina explains that she's just keeping it a secret. Okuda Kaigo says he'll pretend he didn't hear. A man thanks Okuda Kaigo for the cheese and cod roe, and Kaigo replies, you're welcome. Kaigo informs them they're out of ingredients and need to go fishing. Okuda Kaigo says he's going fishing and asks him to guard the house. The man replies that he will, of course. The girl asks if a goodbye kiss is something personal, and Okuda Kaigo kisses her. He says he shouldn't relax and orders the house to be watched because he's leaving. The man reports that it's cold. Okuda Kaigo says he's missing the warmth of the ash and needs to finish and leave as quickly as possible. The man asks what it is, and Okuda Kaigo replies, He says there are a lot of holes in here and asks what the hell is that? Then he notices the spikes and says, followed by a scream of arg. Okuda Kaigo says that this is a new kind of monster that he didn't expect. Then he yells, damn, and gives his assessment. The guy reports that a giant echinoderm monster attacks with flying needles. Its weakness is lightning, and it's the natural enemy of the servend. The man says it's some kind of sea urchin. Okuda Keigo says, "Wow," and explains what's going on. The man explains that perhaps the number of servants being killed has increased and the ecosystem is collapsing. The man tells Wolverine about the Thunder Sword. He explains that the spikes are spaced out at regular intervals and realizes that when he fires, it takes a few seconds to reload. Then he notices something and says, Okuda Keigo says so, and now he gives another blow and delivers a powerful blow. He reports a level increase. On the right, he sighs with relief, and on the left, he says he's done it. Information appears about moving from level 16 to 17 and increasing physical strength from 36 to 38, magic from 26 to 28, energy from 30 to 32, and durability from 40 to 42. Okuda Kaigo says the water is cold and he'll gut it for now, then says, "We'll see." He reports that it looks promising. He explains that these are the ovaries of a giant echinoderm, evaluates them, and notes the excellent taste upon superficial examination. The guy clenches his fist sharply and looks ahead tensely. Okuda Kaigo says that even purple sea urchins raised on premium kelp don't taste as good as this one, and it's so big, it's a little scary. Okuda Kaigo reports that he was so excited he screamed loudly and that he needs to take it home quickly. A woman says, "What is this?" A man with an eye patch asks, "What is this?" And another woman exclaims in shock, "Oh my God." The man says he'll take the child to the kitchen and says that, come to think of it, they've never eaten anything like sashimi and that they've probably never eaten such a grotesque creature. Okuda Keigo asks if it's cod roe with cheese, and the man says it's something completely different and much more delicious. The first is sea urchin in salt water, which they hope everyone will appreciate. He takes a spoon and explains how to eat it properly, then tastes it and says they'll start eating. The girls watch him. The woman says that you take a spoon and eat. The man explains that you take a spoon like this. The guy says he wants to know what their reaction is. The girl says, M. Okuda Keigo says it's time for the main course. The girl says it's delicious, and the man shouts that it's magnificent. Then they're shown clinking glasses. He explains that to achieve the sea urchin texture, you need to quickly scramble the eggs and presents a soft and fluffy omelet with raw sea urchin. Several people then compliment the dish, noting how quickly it cooked and asking them to enjoy it. The woman says she wants another helping. The man says it's delicious. Okuda Kaigo says it's delicious. The woman asks him to be careful. The man asks if they're drunk yet. He says that Ash has a dirty face too and sighs. Ash says that he's going to take a bath and then eat, and the man agrees. The dog says it's time to rest. Okuda Keigo says it's best to swim outdoors in winter and sighs. He says the clear sky and beautiful stars, as well as the feeling of relaxation on his frozen body, are simply irresistible. He notices a sound and asks if Margot has run out of food. Margot answers, paying attention to his question. The girl says, "Keigo." Okuda Keigo drinks from a glass. The guy is coughing and choking, screaming. The girl Yurina asks what happened. The woman steps into the water. Okuda Keigo laughs and says they're in the bathroom. The little creature makes a sound. He and the girl are silent. Okuda Keigo tells him that women in this world are persistent. The girl tells Keigo that he is. The girl then turns to Keigo, saying, "Hey." The girl tells him to look at her body. He says that after all, he is a man. Okuda Keigo says it's not funny and asks them to stop. He says they have guests and asks who sent him here. The girl next to him is silent. The woman says she'll be right out, and he says he knew it, Marjo. The guy shouts at her and abruptly opens the door. The woman says she's the main culprit. Okuda Keigo expresses irritation. The man asks if it's true that she's the main culprit. The woman tells him he's a pathetic pervert, and he apologizes. He says he's having a nightmare. The man is surprised. Okuda Keigo says she's angry because he left her alone and adds that he doesn't know what to do. He explains that he understands that she doesn't want to be alone and says that he loves Yurina very much. Okuda Keigo asks why they're being looked at like that and blames their interlocutors. The tattooed man and the woman with the cup laugh. The woman says, "Hee hee." He says that everyone is finally asleep and he sighs. Then he explains that he can't keep this up forever and needs to think carefully. Okuda Keigo reveals that in another world he was, quite literally, a recluse. He explains that Yurina is the love of his life and the girl he treasures very much. The woman says she now has someone to protect. He speaks with a determined expression, holding the woman's hand. A man with a short haircut and two swords on his back stands nearby and looks at them. A woman in glasses watches the scene. She tells me that this time it's for real and that's what really matters. Okuda Keigo says he's creaking. He's saying he can't pretend to be a lone wolf anymore. He reports that they still have a problem and explains that it is that aristocrat Henry who is sending his thugs after them. Okuda Keigo says they have plenty of money and the chickens are fine. The texts say he likes the house, but if the location puts Yurina in danger, that's a different matter. He states that he can't afford to make a mistake because it's too important. He then explains that if he fails, everything will be lost. Okuda Kaigo says he will stay because he is not alone. He says that when he wakes up tomorrow, he will talk to them sober. On this day, Okuda Kigo told everyone the whole truth. He reports that he cured Master Byron's right hand with a potion and attacks Yurina, and also says that the thief was most likely sent by Byron's son Heinrich. Okuda Kaigo reports that the conclusion they've reached is the same as the one he reached last night. He explains that he and Yurina will be leaving this house. The man explains that if the aristocrats in power took the matter seriously, he would likely be captured before he could. He says that they will leave here by carriage. The girl starts to object, but he interrupts her. The man turns to him and hands him something, to which he responds with a question. Okuda Kaigo says that a map of the Lancaster Kingdom's surroundings will be useful for a quick overview, explaining that he hasn't needed it before. He thanks Margot. The man with the eye patch says the trip would be fun, and he agrees. The woman says she's never been on a trip before and is really looking forward to it, and he confirms this with the word definitely. He says, I appreciate it. The man says that he will definitely go and overthrow Heinrich and then come for Okuda Kigo. And Okuda Kigo says that while the man enjoys the ride with Yurino, they will take care of the rest. He says thank you to Margot. The man turns to Margot. Okuda Keigo says that since they've already decided, then fine, and offers Yurina to pack her things, to which Yurina agrees. He informs her that the chickens will go to a farmer who knows Sarasu. The man explains that Margot will be leaving with Juno, who often hunts monsters. Okuda Kaigo says they'll also invite Elsa, and the woman says fine. Okuda Kaigo explains he doesn't want to cause them any trouble, but he needs to make sure they say goodbye. He says that between packing, he wrote a letter to his best friends and asks them to read it when he's alone. He then explains that there's one more important thing and hands over the envelope. Okuda Kaigo announces that he will be traveling alone with Yurina. Then he says he must make a move. The woman says, Yurina. Okuda Keigo shows a flower and tells what it is. The girl asks what it is. He says that he will love the girl all his life and protect her from adversity. Okuda Keigo asks if he said it well. The girl replies that, in any case, she will never find the words to describe her beauty. The woman says that she will love him all her life and calls him her sun that shines every day. Okuda Kaigo reveals that the vow Sarasa taught him was recited by him, and he gave her a special flower, signifying a happy marriage. Sarasa explains the meaning of this flower. Before winning, he announces that the wedding will be just for the two of them. The woman says the dog is barking, and the man responds with a question. Okuda Keigo and the woman hear the howling. The dog says the man is a fine priest, and the man confirms it. After this, the man felt a strange sense of courage. Okuda Keigo reports that he left letters for the boys, and then says that he is now heading out. A girl cries and hugs Okuda Keigo, who stands in front of two men. The men are crying too. He says he's in pain. The man calls out to Keigo and Yurina. Okuda Keigo tells Yurina they're leaving, and Yurina agrees. Okuda Keigo says they can't stay here any longer and that things will only get harder and harder. He reports that he doesn't think they will ever return here. Okuda Kaigo reports that Margot said she was going to overthrow the nobility. The boy asks if he knows what to do, and the man replies that everything is fine. The man explains that, frankly, he doesn't think it will happen. He tells the boys to take care of themselves, and that they'll see each other soon, and wishes them happiness. The girl says she'll protect Yurina. Yurina says that. Okuda Kaigo says there's no need to cry because everything will be okay now. The girl explains that she can't stop crying because she was so scared. He says, turning to the girl, she says that everything is fine and they are with them, and the text says that they are being followed. Okuda Kaigo asks what he should give Margot, and she replies that it's a self-defense tool, and he says he believes in them. Then Okuda Keigo explains that it's a slingshot, and if you add an attribute to the projectile, it could be a real weapon. He reports that, according to Margot and her friends, they've already. The guy says that he already has experience with a slingshot and is almost sure that someone is hunting him, and also says that he does not think he will ever live to see that. The woman explains that, to regret her decisions, Zelda should never have been seen in public. She says they were on the brink of disaster, but the man says it's great. Okuda Kaigo announces that they're going to see the tyrant Konamahu, and the man says it will be fun. The texts say there's nothing better than going on a journey that doesn't involve anything like that, and that he'll take it as a good opportunity and look at the bright side. The man adds an attribute too. It's reportedly dangerous to drive on unfamiliar roads at night, but even though he keeps an eye on them, they mustn't let their guard down. Kiapu tells Kiapu, and he asks Kiapu, Okuda Kaigo says it's delicious, and the girl says yum. The guy says it's a rabbit, the girl says she thinks it's a snow ferret. The text explains it's like a honeymoon, and the guy asks if that's true. Okuda Kaigo tells him to watch. The text says it's a honeymoon on a horseback ride under the starry sky, and what a romantic situation it is. The woman sighs and says she's cold. He remains silent and says he knew they weren't prepared enough. The text says they're right there in plain sight, and above it, it says, full visibility. The woman thanks him for the clothes he's prepared, and Okuda Kigo replies that he's always welcome. Okuda Kigo informs him that he has 3,000 gold coins, which he can use to buy a covered wagon. The guy says the moon is beautiful. The girl agrees and asks if anyone is looking at the moon right now. He wishes the girl good night, and she says the same. The sound of the door opening caught Okuda Keigo and the girl's attention. He sat up abruptly, and she looked at him in surprise. Keigo asked what the sound was, and the girl replied that she would cover for him and called him by his first name, Yurina. Keigo called her by her first name in return. Then Keigo saw. The woman says she's not alone anymore and that they'll survive together. He says the situation is too dangerous and advises them to move away. The woman replies that it's okay. Okuda Kaigo reports new information about a high-level monster with the body of a chicken and the tail of a snake, vulnerable to light, and lists its abilities: a magical eye attack, petrification, and poisonous breath. The man explains that the monster hasn't noticed them yet and says, he gives the call and orders an attack. He tells Yurina to stay put and shouts light while attacking. He orders it to be eaten, and a shout is heard in response. Okuda Kaigo announces that next time he will use a poison arrow, and now the enemy will not be able to attack. He says everything is working fine. He strikes the creature, which emits a piercing scream. Okuda Keigo informs him that all that remains now is to finish him off. The girl explains that her summoned creature has attacked and will now release its poisonous breath. The man yells at the blue wolf to run, and the creature makes a sound, ah ah! He says, damn. He notices the approaching paw and says no. The man calls Yurina and urges her to act now. Okuda Kaigo says strike, then delivers a powerful blow to the dragon, knocking it down. He reports a level increase from 17 to 18 and lists the stats: physical strength 3840, magic 2831, energy 3233, durability 4244, intelligence 8385, dexterity 4344, speed 4143. He says he doesn't care about this level, and a boy pours water into the open mouth of a beast. The sound of pouring water is described as spishik, spishik. The woman tells him that if he doesn't want her to die, he must do what she says. The man explains that he can't allow himself to die because he has a goal he must fulfill. Okuda Kaigo says, damn. The image has no text or speech, but shows a cross erected on a hill. Okuda Kaigo tells him that he wanted to be with him until the end, and thanks him for always protecting them. A woman stands next to him. On the right, dogs are howling. He says he's cold. The girl says she's cold too. The dogs continue howling. Okuda Kaigo reports that he felt no weakness and that he is overflowing with strength, as if in honor of the hero's triumphant return. The guy reports 2 failed operations and, furthermore, they themselves managed to escape. The man shouts that something terrible is happening here. The man says he doesn't need an apology, he demands results. The man says it was an accident and he's very sorry. The man explains that, according to the mafia, the man says that if that happens, Jill, he'll make his move. The man explains that he'll tie up Kigo Okuda and Yurina and bring them to them, where they'll sit at their feet. The man says to forget about it and get on with their business. The maid rings the bell. The man orders the captain to be called to his office and to gather about 50 people. The girl agrees. The man says he can be counted on and leaves. The man laughs. The man informs her that if Jill is present in person, Keigo Okuda will not survive today. The man explains that if his girlfriend is taken hostage, Keigo will have no choice but to create a potion to restore body parts. The man says he's already made arrangements with the Church Inquisition for a special torture chamber, and will make them regret it, warning them that they can no longer count on a decent life. The man says so. Okuda Kaigo asks what else his father is worried about and explains that, just like with the dagger, someone will inevitably rise up. He explains that they have completely taken control of the city council and even attracted such an influential figure as the Adventurers Guildmaster, Shulak, to their camp. The hero advises that executing or imprisoning him would be difficult because it would damage his image, but he can at least drive the henchmen out of Leicester. Okuda Keigo says that after this, house arrest will free him from the problem and confirms this with the word true. The man explains that first they need to deal with Doni and the others, saying they can drive his lieutenants out of the city. The man reports that Kaigo sent each of them a letter that day and explains that he said it was strictly forbidden to read each other's letters. Okuda Kigo says he'll take a look. He says he knows it's a bit awkward, but he's texting Margot. He explains that Margot said he was going to overthrow Heinrich, but he hopes he won't take it too seriously. Okuda Kigo says everything will be fine with him and Yurina. He says that when he first came to this world, a man sold him weapons and armor for free, for which he is very grateful, because without them, monsters would have killed him. The man reports that later, he began coming to his house at every opportunity, which was annoying. The man explains that. The woman says she knows she can be a bit of aloof and knows the guy is going out of his way to keep her company. The man thanks her for being there without saying a word, saying he felt like it was the only thing that saved him. The man tells everyone in Leicester to take care of them, especially the adventurers whose lives depend on the dragon anvil. Okuda Keigo wishes Sarasa all the best and continues talking. He explains that he doesn't like to talk much and left everything as is, asks to keep Sarasa and Elsa in the dark about his thoughts about the impossibility of returning to Lesta and hopes that they will understand why. He tells them to take care of themselves. Okuda Kaigo tells June he's embarrassed to talk about it. He explains that he doesn't think he'll ever return to Lester, which is why he's writing to June. The tattooed man tells Margot he said it. He says he's indebted to his interlocutor and that they defeated Cockatrice together. He explains that he couldn't have done it alone, that it was hard work, but when they did it, he felt great. Okuda Keigo says that when he lost his heart to Sarasa, he was so exhausted and depressed that he didn't know what to do, but he is very glad that Keigo found himself a girlfriend, Elsa. He announces that he plans to travel north to the city of Tirant, and then will continue traveling and protecting Yurina until she is safe, and explains that a man protects a woman he is in love with. He asks to look after everyone in Leicester and says that if he could. Okuda Kigo says he shouldn't get involved in too many adventures and shouldn't make Elsa cry, but should instead make her happy. He asks him not to tell Sarasa and Elsa that he's unlikely to return, as they'll probably talk about it. The girl listens with a questioning expression. He tells her that his hut will be useful when they go into the forest and offers to use it. He also says that if he wants, he can live with Elsa. Sarasa has the key. Kaigo wishes them luck on their first big adventure and promises to be sure to help. The woman tells dear Sarasa that she may be worried about not being able to return to Leicester, but promises she will. The woman explains that Ash, whom Sarasa always cared about, will miss her. The girl says that when she first arrived, she made a deal with him because she didn't know what was right and what was wrong. The man says she kindly introduced him to the Adventurers Guild, and without her, he would have died long ago. Okuda Keigo explains that the raw sea urchin he ate yesterday was an egg from a water monster's nest, and he wanted to feed it to Juno and Elsa, but he's unlikely to be able to do so anytime soon. He tells them they're in the river where he usually goes and offers to ask. The woman says she's written so much it's hard to summarize, so she leaves it as is, and the man asks if she's okay. The woman explains she had no choice, and the man asks if there really wasn't another option. Okuda Kaigo tells Elsa that she's been very kind to him and that he'll definitely return to Leicester to see how she's doing. He allows her to use his cabin with Juno and doesn't mind if they live there. Okuda Kaigo explains that Juno is adventurous. The woman tells Juno that he's always been very protective of Ash, and she's sorry they won't see each other for so long, but that's just how fate has it. Juno asks what's going on at this hour. The boy says he understands what the letter says, and explains that yesterday he gave Margot and Sarasa his new dish raw sea urchin for the first time. The girl asks what's wrong with Kigo's house. The boy explains that he told Sarasa how to hunt and cook it and hopes she'll try it. Okuda Keigo announces that he'll be cleaning and staying with the girl occasionally. She says Keigo asked her to. The girl explains that she won't say goodbye and thanks him for everything, wishing him happiness. A man calls another a son of a bitch and smashes a glass. He says this misanthrope doesn't even want to live in Leicester and asks how he plans to live without their help. The man remains silent, leaning his head on the table, then announces that Kigo should be free and asks what the higher-ups have done. The man coughs and exclaims, then tells Kigo what he has done. The man informs them that Master Bayern, Elsa's father, the city councilor, Juno and Elsa, adventurers, are regular customers at his shop, and Yurina works at the cabaret. The man demands they think and asks who else is there. The man says he will anger Henry's son and save his friends, and also says that this is all he could think about. Ash reveals that his name is Ash, and that the precious name was given to him by the master. Okuda Keigo informs him that he's not as useful to the master as he'd like, and explains that he can see the color of the creature's soul because a stain is coming out of its body. The woman warns that there are bad people there and that he should be careful. Master and Yurina together, their soul color as bright as a fire. Okuda Kaigo says that since the master and Yurina are back together, He's glad the color of his soul shines more beautifully than before. The man says he's now having fun adventuring with Uncle Blue Wolf. The cat says they're so cool, and the man explains that it's just a way to survive. The wolf says that they now have meat, and the cat says that he has meat that the owner gave him and offers to eat it, to which the cat replies, "Thank you." Okuda Kaigo reports that Uncle Blue Wolf taught him many things and explains that this song is called Wolverine's Requiem and is a song for the departing souls of brave warriors to the Tree of the Gods. He explains that to the west are peaks that represent the wolf village. The wolf explains that wolves are brave and can stand up to the strongest enemies. The man says it's difficult, and the girl laughs. The big wolf informs the interlocutor that he is their next master and advises him to develop slowly and take his time, warning him that next time he must learn to speak. The little wolf replies that he understands. The text block describes the big wolf as a kind, sometimes strict, and courageous uncle. It's reported that he and his uncle's friends sang a requiem for Wolverine. It said that the cockatrice killed him. In the upper right corner, it says his soul disappeared into the sky with a warm glow. Upper right and left, it says he was returned to the vessel of his soul. Lower right, Master Keigo explains that he is a very strong man and even defeated the interviewee's mother, who was there. Okuda Keigo says it's for him. The wolf says he's his mother's enemy. The man says that they follow the air, that this is their code, and asks to accept it. The man says that he knew about this, but only vaguely, just like himself. He barely remembers her, but he knows that she attacked the master, and the master defeated her. That's all he knows. The boy explains that he's just like the wolves, and considers the law of the jungle to be normal. He explains that his master and uncle also fought for life and protection, and if you lose to a stronger opponent, you die, that's all. The boy explains that's why he would never have thought about. Okuda Keigo says that the owner is not only strong, but also kind to the wolves, and most importantly, he has a very beautiful soul, so he will fight for his owner. The wolf says that he will continue to fight for his mother and uncle, who are watching him from a tree. The man explains that they have done everything they could. According to the map, he reports that they fled from the place where the blue wolf was buried and continued on to the city of Tyrant. He says that they have finally arrived, and the girl adds that this is Tyrant. At the bottom right, it says that according to Urina, Okuda Kaigo reports that, judging by the rating, it's one of the inns. He explains that this isn't surprising, as they've already spent several nights in the carriage, and notes that the girl looks tired. The boy says there's a room for two, and it's unclear how far they'll have to go, so he needs to give the girl some much-needed rest. The girl thanks him. The boy explains that he paid the boy to look after their things and do some shopping for them. Okuda Kaigo informs them that they got a nice room, and then explains that there is a kitchen and a shower. He says that he and Urina should rest today, and Urina calls Kigo by name. The girl asks him not to run away today. The man agrees. On the left, a man asks to check the goods and the horse, and on the right, a woman says that the guy really found a covered wagon. The boy says the horse is suitable and its coat is shiny. The man says he likes the horse and is buying it and is selling his cart at the same time. The girl explains that it will cost 188 gold. Okuda Keigo says, woman, woman, woman. Okuda Keigo explains that judging by the reaction, it's a filly. Okuda Keigo, thanks. He says he'll be called Queen May and calls it a potato. The guy says he's not very good with names, but whatever. The girl says it's a wonderful name. Okuda Kaigo says he needs help moving all the things, and the boy asks how many silver coins he'll get, to which Kaigo replies, no jokes. The girl addresses Kaigo by name, and the boy greets Urina-san. He asks the girl if she slept well. The girl replies, yes, thank you. The girl says she wants to talk to Keigo, and Okuda Keigo responds by asking if. He says the girl wants to see the city. The girl says they're just in the next town, and she wants to get as far away as possible, just a little bit. Okuda Kaigo says, let's go, holding the girl's hand. The girl agrees, saying that since they're already here, then of course. Okuda Kaigo asks him to take care of the rest, to which the man replies that he will. He says they're juggling knives. Then he and the girl play together with other people. In the next scene, the girl explains they've come to the circus, and he smiles, looking at her. Okuda Kaigo and the girl take the stage to applause and enthusiastic cheers from the audience, who dance and raise their hands. Then Okuda Kaigo and the girl smile at each other, surrounded by falling petals. After their walk, he announces that they've checked out of the hotel and thanks them for the ride. He says they'd love to enjoy a city tour, but they probably shouldn't linger too long. The guy says that his premonition was right, and Okuda Kaigo says, and. We didn't know it then, but we were a hair's breadth away from danger. With a new wagon, their journey continues. The man says it's crap and asks what kind of report it is, explaining that it could also damage his honor. He reports that, having received information from a noble from Tirant about Keigo Okuda's whereabouts, he called the Jiru Corps in pursuit, but the permanent courtyard where they were staying was Okuda Kaigo says he has no choice but to do everything covertly, and confirms this in response to the woman who approaches him. He explains that it would be boring if he died and refuses to put a bounty on him. Okuda Kaigo says there's a chance that if he overdoes it. The man says he'll provide each soldier with a horse, so when they pursue, he won't be able to escape in a cart. Then the man explains that to force him to comply, he'll order Yurina tortured before his eyes. The two men ask if they were invited and laugh, after which one of them announces that the plan is excellent. The man with glasses says he'll tell the maid to prepare the horse and that he needs a new woman, then promises to give her a taste of this humiliation and confirms that he understands. Johnny says his name is Johnny and he's a member of the Pleasure District Mafia. Johnny explains that he grew up in the slums and had a huge rival, and now this pile of trash is his. Johnny says he remembers the rival. The man explains that he's in pain. The man says the client was an older gentleman with a white beard and that he will receive his payment in advance, even though he acted somewhat unusually. The man explains that they received an order. The guy with the mohawk explains that they, Johnny and the Seven Devils, accepted. A man says everything just ended in failure, and they even lost their weapons. Another man explains that the finishing touches even cost him his precious mohawk. Another man suggests growing it back with fertilizer, and a third man says it's his brother's mohawk. The man says he never would have believed they were being given a third chance and that they were assigned to pursue Kaigo Okuda. Several men shout horse, horse, horses and express joy. The man kneels and begs for mercy. The man in the cloak says that this is... The guy reports that after receiving the horses, they felt better. Their spirits began to rise again and that it was a real horse. He explains that the others are probably having fun pretending to be an army, unlike him. The man says that he recently remembered the name of a potion for healing body parts and is going to drink it. The boy says that if he's caught, he's sure Henry will monopolize the potion, and explains that's what they should do. The man on the horse says they'll stop, and the other man agrees. Several men tickle another man at the same time, causing him to react violently. The guy tells them their destination is Tarant, and the man says the bro is so smart. The text says it's so exciting. To be continued. Yurina says that her name is Yurina and that she worked at the Butterfly Cradle Tavern. A group of girls report that although the establishment was small, for one of them, everyone felt like family. It is reported that each of them had their own past that they carried within themselves, and this included me. He's reported to have had an older brother named Seto. The woman reports that burns, cuts, tying up, violence, and abusive language were part of their childhood, filled with unbearable things. The man yells for the woman to stop yelling and demands that she stop bringing him alcohol, threatening to kill herself. A boy covers a girl's eyes and says, "Mom?" and the girl replies, "Oh," and asks, "Mom?" The text block states that because of this, when the boy was 7 years old, his mother committed suicide. On the left side of the stage, a man yells, "Shut up, she died because of you," and the girl screams, "Mom, ah." The girl recounts how one day, while her father wasn't looking, her brother grabbed her hand and they ran away from home as fast as they could. She explains that she thought they would soon be caught, but her brother didn't even chase them and their escape was successful. On the right, the man says they later moved to the slums. The girl says they moved to the slums and pets the dog the man is keeping. The boy explains that his brother gave him extra food because he was a rather sickly child and says, "Tada." The girl says that's amazing and the boy explains that she needs to eat more to become healthy. The girl agrees, but says there's no need to steal since they don't have any money. The girl says she never asked her brother what he did or where he went, and assumes he was trying to protect her from worry, and the giant white bird was a symbol for them. Okuda Keigo says the giant white bird was a gift to him, and the girl replies that it's like something out of a fairy tale. The woman says he's fine, and the guy says yes. The text explains that he fainted due to illness and everything has its limits. The woman says the stench is disgusting. The text states that, unfortunately, her brother died shortly after fainting. The girl says life has lost its meaning. Sitting on the edge of the road, she waited for death's embrace, but it would be better if they took care of it. There's another one out there. Okuda Kigo explains that someone extended a hand to the girl. He asks if she is alone and what her name is. In the top right, a girl says she's in pain, and a man says he thinks she's in pain. The man invites the girl to come with him and promises to give her a better job than collecting trash or selling flowers and medals. On the left, the girl explains that large hands easily lifted her while she was trying to speak, and says, the voice says that the one who picked him up was his owner, Josephine, and that it was his mother. When his vision began to clear and his voice returned, he began to cry, hugging her. Josephine says, "Mom." The voice says that she not only took him in, but also provided him with food, clean. The girl screams that her brother is dead and says she doesn't remember shedding a single tear at that moment. The woman explains that her sobs were unstoppable and her mother didn't say a word, only hugging her back. The girl reports that she returned to work after that and explains that there aren't many things a child can do. She's failed many times, but she's never been hit for it. The woman asks if the girl is hurt and the girl replies that everything is fine. The woman explains that everyone who worked there had their own circumstances and they didn't ask her any questions but simply welcomed her. A girl asks why everyone has tattoos and is told they're covering up scars, while another girl says Kaya suits her very well and calls her sweetheart. An elderly man reports that as the peaceful days passed, the wound in his heart slowly healed. A young woman greets everyone and says, "Welcome." The woman says that sometimes her mother taught her defense techniques and that she is a little strong. So men are usually afraid and do not approach her, and the man says that she is different. The man explains that this will help protect against evil people. The girl asks how to protect herself. The man shows how to pull the bowstring. The girl notices that it is stretched. The man says that at first he did not understand the meaning of his actions, but now he fully understands it. It is reported that children are often kidnapped, sold, and used as toys for the nobility, and the mother has already saved the child twice. The girl says she remembered doing the embroidery for her mother's birthday and asks how it turned out, to which she replies, "Excellent." The man says the hat he made for her is finally ready. The woman reports that she was so happy. The girl reports that when she told her brother what had happened, he seemed to be overwhelmed with the same emotions. She explains that she learned of her father's death at the same time. The girl says that today, the woman says she's been serving clients since she became an adult and welcomes them. She explains that she covered up the marks of abuse with tattoos and overcame her hatred of alcohol. She also shares that she once fell in love. Okuda Kaigo says he was a man of few words, and sometimes she noticed a hint of sadness on his face. He explains that despite this, when he spoke, his eyes radiated kindness. The girl says he was rather strange and unlike any man she'd ever known. The girl explains that despite his ignorance of their language, he made a book in Lancastrian and gave it to her. She still had doubts that his actions might have ulterior motives, but she was mistaken. The man explains that he saw her not as a prostitute, but as a fellow human being. Okuda Kaigo explains that the main thing is that he is so pure, and the girl says that, like that. He says it's cold and there's no need to see him out, and then says goodbye until tomorrow. The girl tells him that they once watched the first snow fall together, and that's when they confirmed their feelings for each other. She explains that the sight of his tears streaming down his face only strengthened her love for him. Okuda Keigo explains that their life together began exactly like that. He says the drinks the girl drank with him were delicious, and the time spent with him was filled with tenderness. The girl reports that every time Okuda Keigo's gaze fell on her tattoos, her heart ached. The woman says there shouldn't be any secrets between them and explains that they will always support her, so she shouldn't be shy about asking for advice. The man confirms this. The woman explains that she asked Sarasa for advice on this matter and trusted them after seeing the strength of their relationship. She says she plucked up the courage and Cutie Ash watched them admiringly and said it was the most wonderful proposal in the world. He laughed and said the guy was like a priest. Okuda Kigo suddenly confessed to the girl that he would love her for the rest of his life and asked her to become his land. The girl said she was sure. The girl says she will love him for the rest of her life and asks him to be her son, to illuminate her land. She says he agreed and it was the happiest moment of her life. The girl explains that during their journey, he protected her from a fierce cockatrice and could have died as, in Tirant, the girl says she told him everything. She explains that she couldn't hold back her tears from emotion. The man says that if he decides to leave her, then she will stay in Tirant. Okuda Keigo reports that the other man started cooking something, clenching one hand in anger. He says everything will be fine, offers to drink it and then examine the body. The girl explains that he persuaded her to drink a strange drink. Then, for some reason, her body began to emit light, and gradually the tattoos, along with. The woman reports that there's no trace of the marks left on her body, and she's sure her husband is an amazing magician, and the complex she's had for so long has vanished in the blink of an eye, causing her to laugh in surprise. The woman thanks him, and he responds by saying, "Oh!" Okuda Keigo says that he will protect her with his heart and soul, and his love for her seems to have become even stronger. The boy announces that the carriage they requested is ready, and the girl says it's best to lock the door. The girl confesses her love, and the boy replies that he loves her. The woman explains that since he loves her very much, she will love him twice as much and is grateful for the carriage with 2 horses. The man asks, Yurina mentions that she likes the red gerbera flowers blooming in the roadside mud, explaining that it's not an elegant flower, but its resilience gives her strength. Okuda Keigo says he's glad they're traveling, and Yurina says she's glad too. He explains that. He says that since they started living together, the girl has become less shy about showing him her tattoos and asks if he can take a bath with her. He explains that she probably thought he didn't notice, and that, besides, even if she had some kind of flaw, he wouldn't. Okuda Kaigo says that for the first time in his life, he felt pure love for someone and is willing to bet that he will never again meet someone as wonderful as Yurina. The guy says that thanks to the river, they won't have to worry about water and suggests they relax there today, and the girl agrees. The man notices a growling animal and says, Okuda Kaigo says to stand there and then notes that it is a presence. He announces that a sea urchin, or rather giant sea urchins, has come to visit them. He says that right now, and the man notes the excellent support. He strikes, and the man says that this is not all. The guy says they need to keep it up, the girl says they're winning, and the text says they work together. The guy says he made dinner, and the girl says she'll heat the bath. The text says they even divided up the responsibilities easily. Okuda Kaigo explains that the tiranta pasta is seasoned with a sea urchin sauce mixed with salted garlic and bargo fruit wine, and then topped with raw sea urchin. The man says it smells delicious and asks if it's raw sea urchin pasta. A guy and a girl are trying food. The guy says it's amazing, and the girl says it's very tasty. The girl says Okuda Kaigo has a hedgehog on his face, and he laughs. Nearby, a hedgehog makes a sound. He says the bath was great, then he sighs. Okuda Keigo tells Yurina to go to bed before it gets cold, and notices that she's already fallen asleep. He explains that she must be tired from the journey and tells her he has some time to himself. He then lifts Yurina from the table. He tells Yurina sweet dreams, and Yurina asks Keigo to keep sleeping. He explains that he now understands that this isn't entirely right, because he's no longer alone, and he's no longer tormented by feelings of loneliness. Okuda Kaigo reports that when he first visited her workplace, she seemed a little different from the other staff, though she gave him a sense of calm. She preferred to keep her distance from men, all because of her history with her father. He explains that she was simply trying to hide her scars with the tattoos. Margot has them too. He says the gerbera flower isn't perfect. He explains that, abused by her father, she was forced to live in the slums, where she suffered the loss of her brother and was then raised in a pleasure district. Despite all this, she can still smile so brightly. It is reported that all the girls in that place carry their own past, but they get along with each other thanks to their mother saving them. When her friends asked her if she'd be lonely, she replied that she was actually happy to go on a trip with them. This place is her true home, so she'd love to return there someday. The girl makes soft sounds in her sleep. Okuda Kaigo tells her that if she were a person without a single flaw, then he says he's sure he's never fallen in love with her this much, and explains that she talks in her sleep. She did everything in her power to survive in the harsh and lonely conditions, just like the gerbera, and that's probably why he fell in love with her. Okuda Keigo announces that he has decided to express his apologies and sincere feelings in the form of a letter. He tells her that when she wakes up tomorrow, he will show it to her, and says that it is for his beloved Yurina. The girl says that she's not going to give up, even if she is scolded. The guy asks if he did something wrong. The girl says, okay. Okuda Keigo says good morning and confesses his love. The girl responds in kind and smiles, after which he explains that he now understands the essence of the matter. The guy asks to read this. He tells her that he didn't confess his love to her last night, explains that it completely slipped his mind and that he should be more careful. Okuda Kaigo says she read his letter over and over again, like the picture book he gave her, and even though they were close, it was like exchanging letters with a girl from another country. The girl says she loves Kaigo, and he replies that he loves her too. Okuda Kaigo says he's falling in love.